Address the board on any item that has been described in the notice for the special workshop before or during consideration of that item. Speakers, please refrain from using profanity and conduct yourselves in a respectful manner. Another note, I'm sure that many of you are here to talk about the same issue. So when your time comes up to speak, if you would highlight some things that maybe haven't been said by previous speakers, that would be much appreciated for everybody. Okay? So, Ms. Facito.
Dina Donato Palmore.
Good evening, Dr. Jani, Board President Tarantino, Board of Trustees. My name is Dina Donato Palmore, counselor, and more specifically, counselor on special assignments, supporting students in foster care and students experiencing homelessness. I come to you as a counselor for the district for 28 years, as a community member, and as a proud mother of a son attending Olympian High School. My purpose for coming tonight is to talk about what the bargaining process is doing to our community. I say community because the negative impact goes beyond direct impact on counselors and counseling services. It extends to our community's vulnerability to political designs by those who want to see a supportive superintendent and a union-friendly school board fail. What I want to share may sound like conspiracy theory, but we may be unknowing pawns in this political shell game. I don't make it a habit to speak at board meetings. In fact, twice in 1 year is a lot. However, I fear that not finding a compromise in bargaining is by design. I don't understand how the process has been so corrupted that we cannot trust that both sides are bargaining in good faith. I fear that we are playing in the hands of the county that wants this district to lay off people, and in the hands of disgruntled employees and former employees who have political aspirations to be superintendents and or board members, or who will support those that they can manipulate, not for students' sakes, but for their own political needs. We need a reset button. But I've been told it's too late. Is it? When the next bargaining talks begin, I'm asking both sides to truly speak to each other, not posture or play the blame game. If this is the tone of bargaining, we'll lose new counselors who are making an impact on our students' lives. We give fertilizer to that political design I speak of. I know with great confidence that both sides don't want to lay off people. So my question is, what's the problem? As the philosopher and rapper Ice Cube said, and this is for both sides of the bargaining table, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Thank you.
Longmire. Rob Longmire.
Can I get a high five? High five? Fist bump? I don't like fingers. Good job, I made fingers. Good job. Can you say hi? Success. This is my word of the day. We measure success in many ways. Income and profitability, exceeding numbers, satisfaction of job or life, accomplishment of goals or dreams. Everyone has a different metric in which to measure success. For Riley, success means washing her hands and then sitting in her high chair to eat dinner, climbing in the bathtub willingly, walking around the store while shopping, taking her shoes on and socks off with directions, asking for a snack using her words, putting her toys away after playing with them, saying hi to someone who she meets for the first time or for the 50th time, getting through the day, the hour, the activity, or the event, or the routine without a complete and utter meltdown. Parents of children with autism measure success entirely different than others. Saturday, we had a new success. As we're in Target, we're doing some weekly shopping. Riley looked at the strangers in the elevator and checkout stand, waved at them, and said hi and bye without any prompting. She did it all by herself. Communicating without prompting does not happen very often, and so when it does, we make sure to celebrate it. Being here in a room full of strangers is also a success, because as I said last week, she doesn't do very well with a lot of people around. This brings me to another word for today, the opposite of success: failure. This board and this district office is failing the community. A couple of years ago, the district passed out t-shirts with the slogan, "Putting students first." Many of us have seen the proposed allocations for next year and agree that you're not putting students first. No or minimal allocations for SIS coordinators, band or orchestra, curriculum resources, attendance coordinators, after-school programs. You're cutting the funding for after-school program coordinators? How are they supposed to run it? I have students that go to my school and that go to the after-school program who are scared to go home because of gangs are getting jumped. Okay, and what about class sizes? Class sizes are already high enough. Are all of the classes going to be 40 plus students? Is this putting students first? And what about the teachers, the ones on the front lines of education? We are not just a number to cut from the bottom line. You should be cutting from the top down. Riley has successes every day because of the intense therapy she receives. The first 5 years of a child's life are the most developmentally important. The effect of these proposed cuts will be felt deep and hard because I will lose my health insurance and she will lose the team of therapists she so desperately needs. Why are the students being held accountable for your mistakes? Why are the teachers being held accountable for your mistakes? Why is Riley being held accountable for your mistakes? Why?
Espinosa.
Good evening, board members, trustees, superintendent, and staff. My name is Olga Espinosa. I'm a San Isidro resident, Fuerza Amigos de San Isidro, and a proud parent of San Isidro High School students since 2010. So that's 10 years of Cougar pride. I'm here today in support for the counselors, especially San Isidro High. Our counselors have a big role in the impact of our children's lives and day-to-day basis. Counselors deserve more respect from you guys, who might forget you guys are getting paid for our students' attendance in our safety in our schools. Our counselors deserve more respect from you guys, as they are already handling hundreds and hundreds of our children's problems, which include individual counseling, resolving personal problems, planning future goals. They also support as mediators, helping parent and teacher conflicts, assist with college and job applications, scholarship opportunities that benefit them, substance abuse, domestic violence, bullying, anger management, careers, depression, relationships, LGBTQ issues, self-images, stress, suicide, anxiety, and so much more. Our counselors should not be worrying if they will have a job or not. They have a very hard job as promoting success for today's students and school to career guidance, not just for one student, but for hundreds of students. I find it very offensive to even have them on a scheduled budget meeting. There is way more positions that should be questioned in other departments, especially here in the district. Within the district, instead of not allowing our counselors to have work free of worries and safer practices within their busy jobs. Why do you stress the students who trust the counselors more than their parents? Counselors have taken over as a daycare parent, not because they asked for it, but due to our children's running for help to them. Counselors in San Isidro High have a big impact on the students' lives, especially my children. Without them, my children could not have been where they are at and have gotten to. Take some time to think clearly on the disaster that will rise if you take our counselors away. Actually, instead of trying to take them away, you should get more. The success of our children's futures in life is in your hands. Stop playing around with our children's emotions. Our children deserve to have someone who cares for them in the school. And counselors are the ones that know them best, especially in the academic levels. You are going to set our schools into failure. Think wisely of what your decisions would do to our students, the ones that pay your salaries. Don't forget students' lives matter before anything else. And anyone getting paid for these conferences and trips that can be postponed until you have the money to go on them. So all these trips that you guys go to, you need to stop all that. Wait 2-3 years. But I didn't know how big this was, but teachers and counselors need to stay. You shouldn't even have them on this agenda. All these little trips to LA, San Francisco, stop all that. You don't need all these conferences, all these trips. They're paying for your trips, your food, everything. Stop all that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Stop it. Pay the teachers, counselors. Thank you.
Jose Espinosa.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Jose Espinosa. I'm actually a high school teacher at Sweetwater High School. I grew up as National City, and I grew up growing up in National City really made an impact in me. I am I graduated in 2008, but seeing the budgets and being a fourth-year teacher at a school that really inspired me to become what I am. I used to be taken out from different areas, gangs, everything, where I grew up. And teachers like Ms. Reimer, Ms. Griggs, Mr. Ariola, other teachers who inspired me to become a math teacher and help the kids develop ganas to learn math and that inspiration. It makes me, in a sense, afraid because I might lose my job, and I don't want that because I want to inspire kids. I became a teacher to inspire, to teach, and to show them the ganas that I had in order for me to become successful. If teachers are getting cut because there's disagreements between the different boards, come together as a community, not be divided amongst, okay, who gets paid more, who gets this. If you need a cut from the top, not the new teachers, because we gotta suffer. We have families too. We want to help our students, and then we see this, and then we think about all those school years that we took, plus not going into gangs, plus all the violence that we went through, just to grow up and see that there's a division amongst the community is not fair, especially as a Latino, Hispanic, half Mexican, half Salvadorian, being chased by MS-13 and all those other gangs. I was able to get out of all of that because of my teachers, because they helped me, my counselors. They showed me different routes, and it's not fair. If I end up losing that inspiration, the kids who I look at as I see them myself, in them, I will lose that opportunity. And I really do not want to go to another district. I don't want to lose that because in my view, students comes first. And it also, the little seeds that you plant in them and you tell them that they can do things when they've been told their whole life they can't do one thing, or their parents work 2 jobs and you're there to help them out, really helps them, especially the new teachers who really are motivated and really are talented at their craft and their job. Please work together. Stop all these other stuff that you guys are fighting for, trips and all those things, but cut from the top, not from the bottom. New teachers also need that safety net, and also counselors as well as every person in the community, parents as well. My kids, if I want to bring them here, but I don't want to leave. I'm in the point of saying, okay, should I move to Texas? Should I move here? I shouldn't be moving out of the community that I grew up with, that I grew up in. We need that safety net. Please work together. That's all I ask as a brand new teacher. Work together, figure it out. Don't cut anybody.
Fernandes.
Cesar Fernandes, SEA Vice President. I want to comment on some concerns I have from the last meeting. I'm concerned about the timeline that we're going to try to fix this in, right? 40 million in 2 years would be devastating to our school sites. There's just no way around that. It took us about 3.5, maybe 4 years to even recognize that we had a problem. 1.5, we've been working on it. Like I said last time, we gave the furlough days. We did the early retirement. We didn't get where we needed to get. doesn't that let us know we should be having a longer timeline to fix these problems, even if it means that possibly a different board member takes on this task, a different superintendent may take on this task? I mean, I'm just saying years out, okay? So that really concerns me, to hear that you want to do 40 million in 2 years. The other thing that concerns me is that, you know, we see everybody posturing and circling their wagons here at the district office. I just want to say that, you know, I'm wearing pink because I'm concerned about these teachers that really have the targets on their back, that really fear losing their jobs, right? Teachers like Rob and Jose that just spoke, several of you in the room. I take a little bit of difference of opinion with you, Board President Tarantino, on the fact that we might need this bureaucratic oversight at the district office. I've seen this district office do a lot with much less. And I'm going to be real with you. Some of it I didn't agree with, right? In like 12, 13, we not only had to make the switch to Common Core, but we had to make the switch to integrated math. And teachers were like, whoa, how are we going to do that all at once? Okay, that meant instructional guides. That meant a textbook adoption. All that happened with a much leaner district office, right? So to say that certain policies or protocols weren't implemented with consistency across the district, I think is revisionist history. Okay, so again, I say, as others will say tonight, that we need to cut here at the district office as far away from the classroom as possible. Thank you.
Paula Caleta.
Hi, my name is Paula Caleta. I'm a Learning Center teacher at Mar Vista Learning Center. I started in the district in 1985, or 86 actually. In 1985 at Sweetwater High School, there was a 75% dropout rate. They hired teachers in the fall and didn't give them contracts for the spring. That's because students didn't go back for second semester. Tom Williams and Marianne Peralt created the Learning Center program that met the needs of those students. We ran from 7 in the morning till 9 at night. There were blocks. Students that had dropped out, had no interest in being in school, came to the learning centers. Reading levels were 2nd and 3rd grade. We had computer curriculum that was satellite transmitted from the University of Illinois. There were 6 pregnant girls in my classroom my first semester teaching. I looked around, I didn't know what I was going to do. They went into labor. However, that's changed. It's changed quite a bit. Our students have evolved. They have different needs, they have different issues. The Learning Center is a solid program that meets the needs of students that don't get their needs met in a traditional setting. Okay? I'd just love you to share that. In 2017, June and December graduates, the Learning Center programs at all the sites graduated 783 students. In 2018, 785 students, June and December. This past year, 2019, 881 students. So the staff at Learning Center is unique. We have counselor, we have teachers, a special ed teacher, we had instructional assistants, and SOAs. That team nurtured those students, crossed the finish line to graduate. And that's what Learning Center is about. We work as a team. And all I want to say is, people ask me what I do. I believe in students. And you know what? I'm asking you to believe in them too.
Kayla Brown.
How do you start this? Oh, okay, sorry. Today, I'm here to advocate for the Otay Ranch Learning Center. I enrolled in the Learning Center in July of 2019 after moving across the country from Ohio. From day one, I've been supported by my dear teacher, Miss Piconi, and my amazing counselor, who's not here, Miss Kasani. I don't want to go on and on about how brilliant the Learning Center is, because we already know that it's very crucial for the success of students who are behind, who need extra support, so on and so forth. Not too long ago, I fell into a deep depressive episode and didn't come to school for days. But you know who was there to pull me out of it? Miss Piconi. Miss Piconi is my teacher, my support system, and without her, I wouldn't be here. So when you think about cutting these teachers, think about the students. Think about, it's just like when you take a owner from its dog. If you give it a new owner, okay, it's a new owner, but the dog is still attached to their previous owner. These teachers mean more than a paycheck, okay? It's not fair. It's not fair. And there's a saying in our new generation that life is like a sandwich. Either way you flip it, your bread comes first. But we're not rats. We don't want the crumbs. We don't want the leftovers. We need to be put at the top, because if all of the students who are in the Learning Center are put out of the Learning Center and have nowhere to go, guess where they're going to be? On the streets. And then that's another problem. If you take away one Learning Center and push everybody to the next Learning Center, when that one overflows, where are those students going to go? Who's going to be there? How many more teachers can you put? The Learning Center is made for people who need help to get the attention that they need. I'm so far behind in credits, but I'm catching up with the support of my teachers, my counselors, even teachers who aren't my teacher. So it's important. It's crucial. It's crucial. I came here right after school. This is important to me. My teacher is important to me. My education is important to me, because when you guys are all gone, it's our generation next. And then what? You want to have a generation of degenerates walking around doing nothing for anyone? No, it's not fair. Think about it. Think about it. Think about your teachers. Think about who you looked up to. What if they got cut and you were left to your own devices? If people weren't in the Learning Center, if I wasn't in the Learning Center, I would be off somewhere doing something I had no business doing. So think about that. Thank you.
Jose Luis Perez.
Good evening, Sweetwater Union Superintendent and Board of Trustee members. My name is Jose Luis Perez, and I am a student at San Isidro High School. And today I am here to talk about not transportation issues, but about our counselors. The role of guiding counselors is to work with students and parents to help guide students' academic, behavioral, and social growth. However, I believe that this district has forgot about their importance in student lives. Cutting counselors is what we've come to. Wasn't it enough to cut assistant principals and placing teachers on early retirement, or having us walk hours to school due to transportation cuts? I am scared for my future, not only mine, but for all my peers and students being affected by these cuts. Counselors play a major role in our school environment, especially to students struggling in school academically and emotionally. I believe this district has forgot about putting students first, because these cuts have done nothing but make us suffer. This is why today I stand up for not only San Isidro High School counselors, but all counselors and teachers within this district, because like this board, they have a say on this matter. We should not be worried that after the end of the school year, we're going to have less staff at our schools. It's bad as it is, and this is just putting more workload and pressure onto everyone. I believe that this board forgot who are the ones being affected, because it's not your salaries, but it's affecting us students and staff at schools. We shouldn't be suffering or worrying about what will be cut next. At this point, it's bad as it is, and the administration needs to change. We all have a voice. Thank you for your time.
Greg Raby.
These are some tough acts to follow. I'm so impressed with you, young lady. I want to shake your hand. I'm going to give you a hug. You're exactly why I taught in this district for 38 years and coached for 40 years, and my knees are really killing me. But I'm going to take a little different tact because I know a lot of you. I've worked for a lot of you, and you're good people, and you all care. I know Karen Jani. I taught with Karen Jani. When she was at Southwest High running the ASB, we did a lot of things together. And I wouldn't want to be in your shoes because you've got some tough decisions to make. It's like being in a Super Bowl, the ball's on the goal line. You don't put it in, you're all going to get fired, right? It's the NFL. Not for long. But I'm going to tell you this, I'm not here to point a finger at any of you and place the blame on anybody. What I'm here to say are three things. One, my brothers and sisters, my union brothers and sisters, all of the teachers, all of these people, we all want what you want. The best possible education for these kids because we know that a democracy depends on well-educated students ready for the 21st century. I'm not going to tell you how to spend the money because I'm not a finance guy. But I'm going to tell you this, what you're proposing, nobody here agrees with. The cuts that you want to make, they're not going to fly. And there's going to be a fight over it. And I know it's going to be hard. I thought about this. You taught me this a long time ago, Karen, when I was a young teacher and I could barely walk, talk, and chew gum. And I'll never forget this. You taught me about the power of one. You told me that I could do something great by the decisions that I make. This is my friend right here, Jared Phelps, runs the International Baccalaureate program at Bonita Vista High School. Crown jewel of the district. People come from all over the country to see what's happening. So we don't have enough money for Jared. I'm a substitute teacher. I don't make a hell of a lot of money, but I make some money. Could I donate one day of the month and put it in a fund if we don't have money for this man to do his job or any of them? I adopt him. What if I adopt Bonita Vista High School? I taught there for 26 years. Could I take my time, my effort, my energy, my limited talents, and give something back to a school district that educated both of my children and gave me a pretty good life? You did. But I think there have to be more creative ways. There's a lot of people in this community that want to help you. If you call us, we will come. The retired teachers, the businessmen and women that you educate and train to be great employees, they will help you instead of cutting everything. If the state's not going to give us the money, then gosh darn it, we need to find a way to get it. And if we have to work a little bit more, and the people in this community, we owe this district because it trains our kids and it teaches them right from wrong. We're not going to give up on you. We're not going to quit. We're not going to point fingers at you. But we need to come together, all of us, and take a deep breath and think, what can I do to possibly make it better? Can I help this district in some way find a way to bridge the gap? $40 million. I got 3 winning lottery tickets. If I go down and hit it, we might not have this problem, but that's a pipe dream. But I love you guys. I love these teachers. I really care about all of you that are in this room. And I think if we find a way to pull together. I got my old shirt. It says, putting the public schools first. We all want to do that. We all want to put our kids first. So let's find a way to work together and fix it. Not just point fingers and complain, but we all dig in. Just like I coach my football team. You're hurt, you're tired, you're a little beat up. What are we going to do, go cry and quit? No! We're going to rise up and fight, and we're going to find a way to make it work. That's what you taught me. That's what I learned as a teacher in this district for 38 years. To not quit, to not give up, to not blame anybody. To look at myself in the mirror and say, what can I do to make it better, and there's a lot that I can do. And I guarantee you, as God is my witness, you find a way, you take it out of my paycheck, you put it in a fund, and you make it help this district to come back. We can't lose this district. We can't lose a teacher. We cannot lose a program. We got to fight for it and find a way to make it happen. And gosh darn it, we're going to do it. And I'm going to be part of that. So when I drive by Bonita Vista High School with my grandkids, I can say I was part of that school. I was part of the great things that happened there. Thank you, guys. God bless all of you.
Juan Santana.
I have come here not to address this board, but rather to speak to teachers, schools, staff, and parents, as well as the broader community. At our school site, we had guest speakers talk about teen suicide and how to prevent it. One of the major factors that prevents suicide, we were told, were teachers, a caring adult in a student's life. And while this board finds it impossible to calculate how to prevent rifts from happening in laying off teachers, they seem to have no problem placing a numeric value on a student's life. No, I won't waste my time with these characters. I'm here to speak to you about the budget and the fight for education. We must work within this budget, we're told. Why? Why is this budget so small? As educators and as parents, we shouldn't start with the budget. This is how much you get, but with what students need. We should be demanding an 18-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio at the most. An adequate number of psychologists at each school site, full funding for arts, music, dance, art, animation, digital media. Support staff should be doubled, as well as their pay, full medical and pensions for all workers employed by the district. Our schools have been starved of resources, of culture, of what is necessary for kids to actually get a good education. The budget won't permit that. There's no money for that. That's what they would say. Well, as it turns out, there is money. There's money for much more, billions, and not just for education, but for all essential social services that we need. This year, the National Defense Authorization Act will put $738 billion in the hands of the military, not education. This bill passed with an overwhelming support of Democrats, including California's Feinstein and Kamala Harris's silent approval. The Democrats, who are touted as friends of education, have been anything but. Charters didn't slow under Jerry Brown, nor did school closures halt in Chicago under Arnie Duncan. Additionally, Democrats approved for Trump's use of military money to build his border wall. What could those $7.2 billion do for our schools? You may think that after the tearing up of education, the bipartisan bank bailout, funneling of billions to war, that perhaps this year, the CTA and the NEA will finally back a candidate that represents the interests of students and education, not Wall Street and its war interest. But no, they won't do that. They're tied hand and foot to the Democratic Party, which always talks a good game, but in fact is a partner in all these social crimes. Some may claim these are all pipe dreams to reverse damage that has been done to education, to empty the coffers to progress society. To empty the war coffers and progress society, and that ultimately nothing can be done to halt the pink slips here, locally. We will be told to deal with this as a local issue. The answer can be found in this bubble. The reality, as it actually stands, however, is that this is not a local issue at all. And it would be a costly mistake to think about it like that. One needs only look to our neighboring district, San Diego Unified, and see the same situation there. Oakland, Los Angeles, New Haven, teachers not only across the state, but last year's waves of teacher movements throughout the U.S. show that we're experiencing here at Sweetwater is a universal condition throughout the country. In addition to school staff, teachers are part of a broader set of workers facing these ongoing cuts to wages, working conditions, like nurses, firefighters, grocery store workers. These are our allies because they're facing the same problems, the attacks against their living conditions. I don't mean this loosely as some kind of passive solidarity. The working class is a powerful force that can be mobilized. These people will not help us. We have to help ourselves. Thank you.
Lucy Ugarte. Lucy.
May I hand you a job description for the people that I'm speaking about today? Dr. Jani and board, I'm speaking on behalf of all CIS in our district. According to the allocation sheet, the CIS position will no longer be supported by the district, leaving sites to use their own money to fund whatever number of hours that they can. District support was cut back last year, and this year the support is cut to 0. I have supplied you with a current copy of the CIS duty statement. As you read through it, you will see that the CIS duties support all 3 LCAP goals. Highlights include 1, monitoring, coordinating, and implementing interventions and additional supports that lead to credit attainment, course completion, in turn leading to promotion and graduation for English learners, limited income students, foster and homeless students, and students with IEPs. 2, identifying needed interventions and monitoring progress of those interventions. This means meeting with at-risk long-term English learners individually after each progress report and report card, and developing a relationship with them, up to 200 students, and working with them to improve their grades. 3, creating and administering surveys, gathering feedback on services, programs, parent and student needs with a focus on English learners, limited income foster youth, and students with disabilities. 4, assisting site administrators with all advisory board, including DPAC, DLAC, SSC, ELAC, and Title I, planning and overseeing all meetings, publicizing those meetings, creating agendas and documents, and making sure they are in compliance with state mandates. Most CIS continue to work on the site plan because the gathered data is directly related to how money is spent on our at-risk population. This is a huge year-long undertaking that includes working with staff and parents to create the plan, monitor it, revise it, assess it, and rewrite it each year. Many CIS also assist with master schedule planning because our EL student placement is an integral consideration when scheduling classes. The CIS is a link between students, staff, administrators, and if you eliminate this position, the duties fall on administrators and counselors. This in turn will push either the current duties or the CIS duties aside, leaving our most vulnerable students underserved. You might say this position is not eliminated, that the funding has changed to site responsibility. However, using Title I funds for this position for a full 1.0, which is what it takes to do the job at the very least, will encumber most of the site money, leaving very little support for interventions, technology, staff PD, and parent activities. Pulling the funding for this position is truly not putting students first. The CIS position is intimately tied to the success of our most vulnerable student population on a variety of levels, including their educational support, their comfort on campus, and their home and community support. You cannot deny this. It's not the place to cut if you truly believe in putting students first. Without this position, we hope you can survive the federal program monitoring. Thank you.
Phelps. Sorry. Jared Phelps.
Thank you. My name is Jared Phelps. I'm the IB coordinator at Bonita Vista High. I'm here today with one goal, to make it clear how imperative it is that the district reinstate funding for a full-time IB diploma coordinator. Since IB is a proposed cut, but not explicitly on the agenda, I need to tell you what IB is, what the coordinator does, and why IB can't exist without a coordinator. The IB Diploma Program is a 2-year program for juniors and seniors. I want to share some of the key components. It has rigorous academics. Each diploma candidate takes 6 2-year-long IB courses in 11th and 12th grade with both mid-year as well as year-end assessments. We currently have 90 diploma candidates in grades 11 and 12, but another 230 students in the school who take just a few of these courses and still benefit immensely from it. CAS stands for Creativity, Activity, and Service, and it's where students develop their own personal growth plans, developing themselves as creative individuals, people living an active and healthy lifestyle, and committing to authentic community service. The extended essay. Each student in the program writes a 4,000-word research paper in a subject they choose, including math and the sciences. You don't find programs encouraging students to follow their academic passions in research anywhere other than in the IB. This research experience is critical for success in college. The Theory of Knowledge course is a place where students consider what knowledge itself is and how we gain it. Here, they're offered a chance to reflect and think critically about the stuff that they've learned over the course of the past 12 years. The learner profile is where we do character education. All IB learners, and that includes IB staff who are lifelong learners, strive to be knowledgeable, inquirers, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective people. So why does the IB program require a full-time coordinator? Well, my email to you all on January 16th included the entire job description, so I'm just going to give you the top 3 things here. 1, the coordinator arranges and administers year-end and mid-year internal assessments, which include year-long scheduling, verification of authenticity, reporting, and uploading. The CAS and Extended essay don't have a class of their own. The coordinator helps students and their advisors communicate about these highly individualized components of the program. Furthermore, I provide care and counseling for students when they inevitably feel the weight of the stress of their commitments. I have students telling me they sleep only a few hours a night or they don't know how to keep up with expectations. I know the district doesn't have the time or the funds to help every student with all of their mental and emotional needs, but these students have those needs, and I choose to stand in the gap until we have the resources to help those students more. For my first 4 years as the coordinator, I received a full 1.2 allocation to run the IB program. This year, I've received only half-time allocation and have had to teach 2 math classes just to earn a full salary. Don't get me wrong, I love my math classes, but to be blunt, that math says that I accepted a 40% increase in work for a 17% pay cut. What I, our IB coordinator, am doing currently is unsustainable. And if the district follows through with its proposal to eliminate all funding for the IB program, it will be impossible to run an IB program the size and quality of the one at Bonita while teaching full of classes. Eliminating funding for the full-time IB coordinator position will effectively eliminate it, which has been running for 35 years. I'll be back on Monday to read you some of the testimonial that we've received from alumni and parents. I apologize I can't stay all of the meeting. I apologize I can't stay for the whole meeting. I actually have to go to another meeting where I'm going to be hyping, what's the word? Talking about the IB program at our district-wide programs. No, but yeah, but we're going to. And so I implore you to find a way to continue to support our program. Thank you so much.
Miguel Amaral.
Having to bring the kids with us. I have some handouts for you. My helpers are going to help. Ten, Maya. Ahí. Oh, ¿ese es tuyo? Important to make sure they get each hits the right one. Gracias, Maya. Ahí, párate. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michaela Merrill. I'm a counselor at Mar Vista Learning Center. I gave, all of you should have a graph, and basically what it is, it's a kind of just a graphic representation of the different student to 1.0 teacher allocations at our alternative programs. It's not intended to suggest in any way that we should be cutting from those programs that enjoy a better staffing ratio than the learning centers do or any other program does. What it is actually is an acknowledgement and applaud that in fact we are staffing the most needy, in most cases, the most needy with appropriate FTEs. And so I couldn't not do this graphic with the fence, the equity fence, because I remember at one of the the presentations that they had that fence, what the difference between equality and equity. And so if you look at the graph, you'll see that we're actually doing a very good job at equity, except when it comes to learning centers. If you look at the actual enrollment for learning centers, we are staffed worse than a comprehensive site. Go back, fact check the numbers, okay? And I know that perception is what it is, but the reality is something else. And so please go through that exercise on your, somewhere else. So what I'm here to say is that actually that we should be staffed better than the main campus, but we're staffed 50% worse. It's shameful that we want to cut even more. We should be talking about how to provide more resources, starting with restoring SOAs and IAs. If learning centers are underperforming, that's on past directors, not the troops in the trenches. If leaders don't matter and aren't ultimately responsible, then why have them? The proposed cuts to LCs are not about equitable sacrifices. I'm not here being defensive. I'm here to be a disruptor. I'm here on the offensive, to challenge those of you with power to think outside the box, as many of you often ask us to do. Of course I don't want the proposed cuts to happen, just like I'm sure you wish you didn't have to make them. Many of us shared ideas on how to use a scalpel instead of the raised hatchet you're currently wielding. But if you do, don't feel bad for me or my kids. They're going to be okay because they have two hardworking, resourceful parents that make sure that their needs are met. I have full confidence that all of the adults in the LCs and their respective families will be okay. Sadly, I wish I could say the same for too many LC families. Too many LC families lack the resources, not the love for their children, that our district families enjoy. I've provided many of you the graduation rates for Mar Vista High that started to drop due to dismantling of learning centers that Damico orchestrated and which continue to decline with subsequent directors. Implement your proposed cuts and they'll get even worse. I can almost guarantee it. I'm actually envious of many of you who might be near the end of your careers, retired, or have reputations at professional networks so strong that you can leave SUHSD and land a job almost anywhere you want. If you're not going to be bold now and do the right thing for kids, then when? I listen intently to those keynote speakers you've brought to us whom have challenged us to be champions for kids. I'm here doing that, stating it publicly and for the record, before God and my little girls, advocating for the voiceless. I'm full of faith and conviction that it's the right thing to do, and knowing that my family and I are going to be okay. My conscience is clear. I've said my piece. The ball's in your court. Thank you for your time.
Troy Johnson.
Board members, staff, and community. My name is Troy Johnson, and I am the chapter president of CSEA OTBS Chapter 471. And I am here tonight to talk about the classified service that my members and the members of my other two units perform in this organization. When the budget crisis hit, we were angry at the state that past financial leaders and practices put us in as it relates to where we are today. We have worked with the district to help right-size the ship as well as to do the least amount of impact to the members that are entrusted into our care. We worked with the district in the implementation of the SERP, taking 2 furlough days last year and this year in lieu of layoffs, and looking at positions that were vacated and not filling every position that walked out the door. To date, I have a membership that is approximately 50 members less than what we started with in July 2018 from just my chapter alone. These are positions that have not been filled, which equate to an ongoing savings to the district in a very conservative amount of $3.5 million, excluding other savings in benefit packages. CSEA and this chapter did the hard work of looking at positions and doing cuts for this year. All in all, CSEA as a collective have cut where we needed to cut and worked with the district to do our fair share for the least amount of impact to our members. At last week's board workshop, you presented a chart of what you as a board considered high to low essentials. Those descriptors for high essential positions included feel safe and secure, someone who cares, support for emotional mental well-being, supplies and materials, well-maintained physical plant. When you take a look at these descriptors, they exemplify the classified service. As it relates to the OTBS unit, the job descriptions essentially fill these descriptors. The first people to greet you at a school or department are the office assistant 1, 2s, and senior office assistants. Our library media technicians ensure that our libraries are adequately maintained and provide those vital services of providing resources to our students. The attendance technician is the one to report and submit attendance, which generates the revenue that comes into this district. Registrars enroll students and do the certification in Infinite Campus to make sure students are accounted for in our CalPads reporting. Our IT department is run entirely by the people who make up the OTBS unit. ASB accounting techs make sure that student funds are accounted for and the student activities are paid. Our administrators are able to do the job they do because of the relieving of clerical detail that our senior school and admin assistants are able to provide, not to mention the staff payroll. Our students' emotional and mental well-being are met by our licensed mental health clinicians and mental health caseworkers. Our accounting assistants and technicians make sure that the bills are paid and our obligations are met. Our buyers convert requisitions into purchase orders to ensure students and staff have the resources that they need to instruct students. Staff are not going to get paid without a payroll department, and these budget reports in front of you are done by Office Technical and Business Services staff in the Finance Department. And we have not talked about the positions and services that keep our district operational, not only in my unit, but in the operations and paraprofessional units. I ask that you consider the services and look back at the high essential needs that you have identified when it comes to the classified staff, and to remember the efforts that the classified staff have demonstrated during this fiscal crisis, and that we, classified staff, are staff too. We have nowhere else to cut. In fact, we are understaffed. Any more cuts would directly start to chip away at the descriptors that you have identified as high essential positions. I thank you for your time and the work that you have before you tonight.
Russ More.
Hi, good evening. My name is Russ More. I'm at Sweetwater High Learning Center, so I appreciate you listening tonight. I got this information on Friday from the district website that really for us in learning centers, we should have gotten this years ago. So I'm going to go through it real quick, briefly. To run learning centers in our district costs $7,883,000. In order for us to run this learning center correctly for these young ladies and these people, this is what it costs. So right now, collecting ADA in our centers, we are collecting 64% ADA, right? Right now we have 64%. In order to pay for our salaries and run these centers, we need to be collecting 84%, right? So I'm here about solutions tonight, not problems. The district right now, you can see, because I pulled this from your website, you already know, right now learning centers are running at a deficit of $1.7 million. We are losing $1.7 million in our learning centers. Well, let me tell you how we got there. In the last 7 years, we've had 5 different directors. 5. And in those directors, they did not know how learning centers worked. They didn't know how they ran. Some of them didn't care how they ran. So over the last 7 years, imagine this. The district from learning centers alone have been losing millions because of ADA. So here I am tonight to ask you this. This problem is solvable. We can solve this issue. How do we do it? We do it through retraining and reteaching our teachers on how to collect ADA better. This is a solution. Please do not penalize our program for poor management that happened years ago. It is not fair at all. So I'm asking you, we have some dedicated teachers. We are willing to work. We will work. We're going to do it. Where's Coach Ravy at? I love that guy, right? We're about that. I'm an ex-coach, ex-Castle Park student as well. I believe in it. We can do this. So the board, I'm asking you, give us a couple months in learning centers. We already met yesterday. We talked about retraining and reteaching ourselves. We will do it. Don't cut us yet. Don't cut these kids. Don't cut our program. It is one of the best programs I've ever been associated with. If you give us the opportunity, and in a couple months, I will come back with the new data. I will show you what we have done in 2 months. So please, give us the opportunity. Thank you.
Araceli Perez Paconi.
Good evening, board. Dr. Jani. I'm going to try and do this without crying with here next to Kayla, but I want to thank her for her time and her words, and I can't say it any better than she did in terms of illustrating to you why we do what we do in the learning centers. I'm at the Otay Ranch Learning Center. I've been a teacher in this district for 25 years. I started at Eastlake High School, and I remember those days when I first started, and Stan Canaris said, Araceli, can you do peer coaching, teaching? Can you do parenting? Can you do link crew? Can you coach softball, even though you've never played softball? And I remember that energy that I had as a young teacher, and they'd say jump, and I'd say how high. So I really want you guys to remember the energy and the enthusiasm and the passion that our young teachers have, our early starting teachers, because I remember that. And that's what helps our kids like Kayla outside of the learning center. So please don't forget that passion and don't hurt that passion. I found a quote that says, education costs money, but then so does ignorance. And unfortunately, I feel like there's been a lot of ignorance about what we do, not only in the learning centers, but outside of the learning centers. So I challenge you to educate yourselves completely about what it is we do. In all my years in Alted, people outside don't ever completely understand what we do. Last week was proof. I sat here at this meeting listening to some of the questions that were being asked about how the learning centers work, who the teachers are affiliated with, how is ADA collected, and Russ just illustrated perfectly some of the ignorance and lack of direction that we've had in the learning centers that has ultimately cost us money. The learning centers have evolved from a dropout recovery program, as Paula Caleta illustrated, to an all-encompassing program for our kids. We worked with South Bay Community Services last year and had a Here Now presentation on suicide prevention. They walked out, gave us our report, and identified 75% of our students at risk of being suicidal or having emotional needs that haven't been met. Those are the students that we try and serve. If we reduce those services to those students, like Kayla said, what options are they going to have? What resources are we going to give them? Do you realize that the attendance, like Russ said, in the learning centers, a student on the main campus can sit there all semester, show up every day, fail all their classes, and the ADA's there because they're there. In the learning centers, we don't get ADA unless our students produce work. So the opposite happens. I can have a student show up every single day, and when I meet with them once a week, if they don't give me work, there's no ADA. So we have to work on getting students to school to be successful, and on top of that, getting them to produce, along with all the other things that they have going on in their lives. Please consider that, and let's work on educating ourselves and not being ignorant to the realities of our program. Thank you.
Chris Elam.
I'm back again, back to my old routine. Last time I talked about new teachers and pink slips and all those things. I want to continue with some of the things I heard last night. I went back and watched the rest of the meeting that I missed because I had to leave early. First of all, for anybody watching this on YouTube at 2.0 speed really makes it go much faster. Just a little tip for you, save some time for those who think that they don't have time to keep up. So Tom Leet said something amazing last week that I think we should make a banner and hang it in here. That if this weren't here, how many days could we go without this affecting kids? And I really think that just should be the bottom line. And I'll come back to what I've been talking about since July, and now the rest of my high school colleagues are on board with me. 1-to-1, the answer to that is 0 days. Without the computer, the answer to that is 0 days. They know every single day. And so we're still dealing with the carts and the cows, and everybody thinks that's perfect, and that doesn't work. Because kids, especially our kids, and I know I'm a broken record on this, but I'm going to keep saying it till somebody understands. Students at my school, many of whom don't have computers at home, if we're doing stuff in my class, and then they're taking notes on their computer, doing their research, and they go home and they need to finish, or they need to review, or they're absent, and they don't have technology at home, that's not an option for them. So they're the ones that lose out. We have a ton of kids going on advanced dance program and ROTC. They're going to be out Friday. Several of them said, well, I don't have a computer at home. I don't have any way to access it. Well, they all have phones. They don't all have unlimited data. So we cannot rely on that and expect that from them. Some of their parents take their phones away because they can't behave with their phones. So that's another issue. So the 1-to-1. And then, obviously, if you're just going to demolish the program, then you guys are done. You don't have to do any more work here. Because if you demolish 1-to-1, we can get rid of that frickin' Canvas program you've been shoving down our throats for years and most of us don't use. But it's Canvas. It'll save everything. I was very excited when you brought that up, Paula. So other than a few pockets here or there, people generally don't use it. And as Paula said, and I get it, I will, honestly, and I'll just say it now, I will pay for Jupiter out of my own pocket, which is fine. That's fine. I'll do that because Paula makes a great point. We have Microsoft. We have Google. We have, where's my list? It goes on and on. Because people want choice. Yeah, that's beautiful. Really? So we have half our teachers using OneNote, half our teachers using Google Classroom, half our teachers using Canvas. Come on. That's not realistic just because they want it. It's like how they bought special laptops for us because one teacher wanted them. So you need to start making actual decisions. So streamline that down. If you streamlined all those programs, sold the old laptops and bought Chromebooks, and we've talked about this and I've brought this up, and replaced all these with $250, $350 Chromebooks that they use at Grossmont and they last 4 years and their teachers make it. And when Dr. Jani and I spoke, she said, well, the teachers said they didn't want that. Well, that's back when we had choices and we thought we had all this money to play with. We don't have choices. But as was told to us 3 or 4 board meetings ago, we're not buying new textbooks, and I'm sure as heck we're not getting new ELA books again next year with this budget. Well, we haven't had new ELA books since I piloted it 20 years ago with Holt. But we don't need them because we have 1-to-1 and we want all of our teachers using OER resources. You can't use OER resources if you don't have laptops. So you got to figure out what you want to do, folks. And here's an idea. I got to go to this, Tarantino. I'm sorry. First of all, we're trying to work as a team, and you're sitting there going, oh, it's an empire. Talk to us about your empire, Dr. Fulcher. It can't be an empire. If you're working as a team, that wasn't teamwork. I'm just going to call it out. And I know I don't always work as a team, so I recognize it. Game recognizes game. I get it. But that's not teamwork. That's defend yourself. You can do this. That's the loaded language in the English classroom. So that part is a big deal. The idea that you're saying, well, nobody on this board respects that I have institutional knowledge. No disrespect, but it's been a while. All these people who've been speaking to you, they have current knowledge. They're in the room. All these people, no disrespect, it's not personal. But these people on both sides of me who you say are so critical, go to the English 9 teachers in our district and find out what they're teaching. It's different at every frickin' site. They're not coordinating like you say they are. They're just not. And so we don't need them then. If you cut, I'm sorry, my friends on my left and my right, students aren't going to have a freaking clue for at least a year because nobody's coordinated anything together anyway. So we're doing UBD again. You got books sitting in the PDC over there of UBD when we did it last time. Like, these people are wonderful and they're great, but they're not doing what you claimed at the last board workshop they were doing, which is coordinating and grouping everybody together. How do we have a PD person? How are we running more PD? Who's paying for all those subs? You know, like, we just got that email today before a budget workshop. Hey guys, we have all this more PD coming out this year. We're all like, wait, what? So all those issues, I think we really need to look at. And I think what Tom said hits it. Will the kids notice? Because they notice the one-on-one. I have lost so much class time this week getting kids logged into the cow and all those problems with the tech problems. But if you do cut it, then get rid of this and get rid of all these programs, and then you can all go home because we'll be done. Because that'll destroy it, but it'll also destroy our kids' education.
Renee Santa Cruz.
Good evening. My name is Renee Santa Cruz, and I'm a second-year teacher here at the district. For the many people throughout this district who face potential pink slips and cuts this coming March, I want to be very clear that my remarks are not only about the potential loss of my job, but are about a much larger and more fundamental issue. Our students need fully funded schools. Lower class sizes, 25 to 1, 18 to 1, like someone had said. More teachers, paid living wages and benefits, as well as robust arts and music programs, libraries, nurses, psychologists, and staff, materials, and structures for learning at every school site, every single one. We need an expansion of these things. Yet as we're on the front lines maintaining a semblance of quality education for our students, within major restrictions, mind you, you're up here with your empty language about feelings and prioritization, crafted for public consumption, when we know full well you've already signed off on millions of dollars in cuts to the very things our students need. And we know, in fact, that you will sign off on millions more. What these cuts speak to are an immense betrayal to students and to the community, and are a direct assault on their fundamental social right to high-quality public education. I speak for myself, but I know I represent many teachers in this district when I say a couple of things. One, I reject your budget. And the attacks on services and jobs integral to student success and teachers' livelihoods. I don't accept looming pink slips and cuts to vital on-site programs and positions, and I will argue that the solution to these issues comes not through these show meetings or through closed-door discussions or negotiations, but through a much more broad struggle taken up by teachers, community members, students, and parents. And secondly, I reject the line that there's no money. How is it that in California, the fifth richest economy in the world, with the highest concentration of billionaires, mind you, in the United States, it's 157, that there is no money to adequately fund public education? Teachers, parents, students, community members, we need to organize and discuss democratically how we are going to prevent these cuts and continued attacks on public education. They are not only within our district, but are part of a much larger assault on public education by the moneyed interests that are promoting privatization of schools, for one. I argue we need to fight to protect the right to public education. Thank you for your time.
No further speakers.
I want to thank all of you for your comments and the fact that you were very cognizant of not repeating things that had been previously said, and I really appreciate that, and so does the board. So with that, I will turn the workshop over to our facilitator, Luz Cáceres. Welcome back, Luz.
we go. Good evening. So I just want to start off by noting how much I appreciated the hearing from folks, right? That's a lot of passion. It's a lot of energy, and clearly a ton of dedication in thinking about the kids of the district. And I have a sincere appreciation for that. Oh, you all right? Okay. There we go. Okay.
Excuse me, Luz, but there are seats in the front for those of you who would like to stay and be part of this. Excuse me. Okay.
All right. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we are, here's the plan for today. We're going to have just a really quick refresher. And we do have one update that we just want to share with the board because it's a notable one. The governor has released the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which has a direct impact on the multi-year projections. And so we're gonna, before we get right back to the work where we left off last week, we're gonna just pause for 1 second to make sure we get that update from Dr. Salkett about the impact of the governor's proposed budget on our multi-year projections. So the exact same desired outcomes for the workshop, and we'll again do our check-in at the end of it. Our norms, again, same norms we agreed to, and these, as a reminder, are your actual norms from your governance handbook. And just one really quick reminder that we agreed at last week's session that if there's a need to maybe just support one of our colleagues and just reminding them about our norms, we just agreed on a quick tug of the ear to support each other in making sure that we maintain these norms, because the conversations are hard, and that's when the norms matter the most, right? When the conversations are hard. And as you know, we did land exactly where we were back last year in terms of that determination of what students need to succeed. Same categories of high, medium, low, and understanding what kids need. With that, I'm going to pause there so we can switch over and have Dr. Salkett discuss the multi-year projections and where we are for the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you, Luz, Board President and Board Trustees and Dr. Jani. So in your packet is a presentation that reflects the update that we received from the governor on January 10th per the statutory requirement. This is the start of the 2021 budget process, what he shared with some of the key factors for the education budget. So there are quite a few slides here. This information is more for a reference for you and as well as the public. So I'd want to go to slide 35. Because we shared with you.
Pause 1 second. Is that in the packet? I think we're struggling to find it.
It's in this. There is this presentation.
All right, let's see.
And it is attached to the agenda item.
Oh, in our notebook.
It's attached on the agenda item.
Oh, it's a link on the agenda item.
Okay, we don't have it. We don't
Got
have
it.
a
So,
hard copy.
We'll work with Deanne to
So
get that.
we're working on the hard copies, and while we work on the hard copies, and you'll have the link already.
So right now, we'll just pull it up from what's on the agenda item.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Salkett.
So there's a lot of information on the key priorities shared by the governor, but what I'd like to share as it relates to the multi-year projection is specifically, we'll get to the slide on the cost of living adjustment, because that's a key factor in the revenue calculations and what it means to Sweetwater. So what's demonstrated on this graph here, what we've shared when we were doing our budget planning for 1920, and then as we look at the 2 out years, the governor's budget in June reflected a cost of living adjustment of 3%. And what that means is that it's a slight addition to our base funding or some of our supplemental concentration dollars. So we use that information for our planning purposes. In December, when I had shared with the board, an update from the Legislative Analyst's Office, at that point, what was speculated is that the cost of living adjustment might be 1.79 for the 2021 year. So it's kind of our preview of looking at what it might mean to our revenues as we plan ahead for 2021. So just a few weeks ago, the governor's proposal is now reflecting a 2.29%. So what I just wanted to highlight with this particular slide is how things change throughout the year. Our budget is a moving document in the current year as well as our out years. So when I had shared with the board last month, we were factoring, and if we can go to the next slide. If we look at column C, looking at the 2021 year ahead, we had a projected shortfall of $26 million at the time, because that was factoring a higher cost of living percentage, which goes into our revenue calculations. So when the governor reduces that amount through the budget proposal down to 2.29, that resulted in our revenues going down, so that meant a larger shortfall. And I had mentioned at the time, just kind of looking at our early projections, we were thinking it would be around $30 million. And so we've taken our first interim information, just changed those factors. As we move forward to our second interim update to the board in March, we will continue to look at enrollment, because that's another key factor. But right now we're just showing, because we were right in the midst of our last budget workshop with this moving piece with the governor releasing his proposal. So that number has changed, that projected number, but it was around what we had shared at the time.
And I would imagine, so next major revision will come at May revise.
From the governor's standpoint, correct. So we will continue to monitor what additional, because now that starts the work, now that the governor's released this information, now the legislative process. So various budget committees, various work at the state level with a lot of our representatives there in the Assembly and the Senate. So the governor will provide an update via the Department of Finance in May to see where some of the economics are coming in over the next few months. And then the legislature will continue to do the work and provide their proposal to the governor by June 15th.
Right. And so as people contemplate how they can make a difference, this is one of those ways. The governor's proposed budget, it's a starting point. That's what happens in January. May revised becomes the recommended budget, and it will shift from where we are in January. So January's proposed budget becomes May's recommended budget, and it's not a budget until we have a budget act. And so between those places, right, so if doing things like contacting the state, contacting your reps, right, those are places where we have the ability to influence what happens in public education in the state of California. All right, so while you swap back, so we are going to start with, in your binders, I'll just give you a moment to find it. We're starting with 8D. D as in dog, as in donut. Dr. Salkid, do you want to run from up there, or do you want to come join over here? Just going to do it from there? Okay. All right, so in your binders, we're picking up where we dropped off last week. 8D as in donut. So if you go to 8D, we'll start off there.
Luz, could I?
Yes.
make a few- So just for the board's benefit, and for everyone in the audience as well, and people listening on live stream, remember this is, the board has not made any decisions yet about any potential cuts for next year. This is an opportunity to, what the staff has put together for our Board of Trustees is really a lot of information, more than they've ever had access to before. information around resources, definitions of resource codes, a level of detail that that we haven't been able to give the board in the past, but we are now able to do that with some increased capacity. And so for everyone's benefit, we are reviewing, the board has asked to see what is everything that we fund in our district. Every position, every contract, everything, utilities, whatever it is, the board would like to see what that looks like. And so contrary to what some people think, that decisions have been made, no decisions have been made. And the purpose of the board listening to all of this and getting all of this information and listening to a conversation and having a conversation and discussion is for them to ask further questions, to give the staff guidance on recommendations to move forward. So just to be clear, the board has not made any decisions yet. They've given us some guidance about right sizing, about restructuring, about looking at contracts, ways we can reduce in the contracts. And staff is doing all of that analysis right now and plan to bring to the board some recommendations once they've given us all of the guidance that they can give us. Just for clarification.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so
could I ask a question there? So will that clear up a lot of the emails we receive in reference to a lot of the emails we received this week on cuts that we said we were already decided on?
Right.
I need to
It
get
may.
clear.
Hopefully it will. The information that our schools have is that we're planning. They're in the process of meeting their 10-day class caps for second semester, and now we're planning for next year. It's not unusual. For the first time, though, ever, we don't always give the other resource allocation information this early in the year, and so some of those have been not posted on the resource allocations because we haven't had the conversation with the board yet. Doesn't mean they'll be there. It doesn't mean they won't be there. Those decisions just have not been made.
Okay, thank you.
Yet.
Can I say something? I just wanted to say that I see you're taking us to a schedule on program managers. And when we first requested this workshop, I was actually hoping that we would go department by department, not type of salary earner, because that's like jumping around and not really seeing it each department as a whole, which would go along with org charts and things like that. It's been a lot of information and very hard to consume the way it's being presented. Just as a matter of comment, I'd like to make that wasn't what I expected when we first were. I was requesting a workshop and to go through detail line by line. It was like, take a look at this department and let's go through their budget, and this department and go through their budget. This is like jump here, jump there, and it's been very confusing.
Do we want to talk about how the notebook is organized, Dr. Salkel, just so that the board and the community knows how it's been organized so that we can understand?
So the board, or the documents on the website as well as the board packet there is we've started out with some references so that way we have, that we can refer to in terms of numbering.
Closer, a little closer.
So we have references on here so that we can refer back to resource codes and different funding sources because different positions are accounted separately. We've also shared information as it relates to enrollment because that is a key factor in how the district does get the revenues. And we've provided duty statements. So a lot of the first couple of items in the package are more for a point of reference. We started with contracts because as we've shared in prior board meetings or even in our interims, we wanted to start with areas that were not focused on our staffing because we are a service provider, and so we wanted to look at contracts, look at those areas. We provided information on the district office and as well as school sites. And then we started to provide information at the last workshop, continuing with that focus on the district office of the positions in that area. We did have information listed by departments. and the specific roles and information there. So we've been looking at positions that are outside of the classroom. That's what's also intended here to look at in terms as we shift away from the district office, and then also then to our support staff. Our budget is about 87% in personnel costs. So we've provided that information and also some program detail for the board for the consideration.
So quite possibly, Mrs. Hall, maybe Exhibit 8A is what you're referring to. It is the district office, department by department. It talks about, it lists what positions are in those departments by work year. Like, for example, if we go to 8A, Exhibit 8A, that is all around the district office positions. So if we start with accounts payable, you'll see that there's the accounting assistant. That's a 260. This 260 means the work year, and then how they're funded. So for those positions, accounting assistants are under general fund, unrestricted. 2 of those positions are being paid for out of the child nutrition program, school program, which is Fund 13. And then it goes, so it lists everybody in that department. If there's a manager or management, it lists them as well. So it lists all management, if there's a certificated and or classified.
So there's no operational accounting on this document. I mean, you can't see what other support they have in their department, just personnel. So this other budgets that they have and manage, you don't include here. And I think the document I did get on it was, I mean, I could map it. I've been trying to do that over the past week, a week and a half actually, before we started the last board meeting, trying to map everything into one document, but it's been challenging because you want to see the whole picture, not just the personnel. However, I appreciate what you've done, thank you. So there's no supplies in the department,
So at that supply budget, we do have that information, but for this process, we were focusing on board direction when we were looking at some contracts. That is the bulk of that information. And so we did share the 5,000s, which are those contracts, and it does list it by department. So there's an accounting department, and it shows how those dollars are allocated.
So what I'm hearing you say then is that you would like to get some more information around the supplies budget for each of the departments as well. And we can get that.
Well, yeah, I kind of wanted to see the positions, the supplies, the contracts, and then an explanation about what those dollars in those supply accounts and contracted services isn't the only thing in the 5,000 group that you may have, but what are the normal costs or what do they cover? I think we heard from Dr. Fulcher last time that most of the contracted services in one of those departments under his umbrella were for the what's the name of that group?
Licensed clinical mental health workers?
No. Yes, conflict resolution. Thank you. So having that kind of here, this is for this contract, that contract, we can see it all in one page and one, laid out. It's much easier to deal with it that way than having to hunt here and see there and then not having it all, just so that in the future, that's kind of a good way to put the summaries together so that you can see the full picture for that department. And then the explanation underneath from the CFO or the chief of that department would be what those services are, what are the targets, what is the mission, and what are some of the key results of what the work has shown as it relates to the goals of us getting students, in the classroom to be successful. That's what I'm going through on that.
All right,
I think we can hear it, but it's hard to remember later on. You can't always write that fast. And then when you're trying to go home and really peruse through that information, it's difficult to remember or even to go back and, like the one teacher said, to watch it at 20/20 speed or whatever it was. So I think that's a good way to put together this sort of information and to have us really be educated on what the purpose of each department, each division, and the whole picture as we go through it. Because this is about the central office, this first part, and then the school sites we understand, we haven't gotten there yet. As my understanding, I haven't heard anything yet about the school site allocations, so, I would think that would be a whole different workshop, just on what those allocations and what those services that are directly allocated to schools to manage would be discussed.
Right, so just a really quick high-level recap. So with Exhibit 8A as an apple, we have essentially all of object codes and Object Code Series 1000, Object Code Series 2000, and Object Code Series 3000 by default, because those will stem directly from the positions. And then in Exhibit 7B, as in boy, we have the 5000 Object Code Series, and now we have a request for the Object Code Series 4000. So that's one Object Code Series that's left. I'm going to imagine that in Object Code Series 6000, there's minimal there. Correct me if I'm wrong. So there's minimal in the 6000. That's the capital outlay stuff. So it's really just the Object Code 4000 then that would be the new request.
Is that all in, I think Section 8 is just salaries, isn't it?
Section 8A would be all of the 1000s and 2000s because it's all of the positions, and benefits are derived directly from the positions.
Right, I get that. I mean, the columns are right, but I'm saying in Section A, I'm just looking through it, and I'm seeing positions on all these documents,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's all that's in the Section A. You said something about 8B was...
So all of Section 8A is our positions. Therefore, those would be the 1000 Object Code Series for certificated staff, the 2000 for classified staff salaries, and then the 3000s are just derived from those positions. So it essentially covers 3 sets of Object Code Series, 1s, 2s, and 3s. The 4s are a new request that staff have noted, and then the 5000s are covered with Exhibit 7B as in boy. And Dr. Salkid confirmed that there is little in the 6000.
I thought you said 8B, that's why I was confused.
Oh, my apologies, my apologies. Okay, so just a quick preview of how we're going to proceed. So we're going to continue with where we left off last week. And Dr. Salkid would start with 8D as in donut. And then we're going to have an opportunity to look at one of the requests that was made was for the updated organizational charts. And so those are now an additional reference that's included in your packets. And so we'll have an opportunity for Dr. Jani to review those with us. And one of the noteworthy items about the organizational charts when we review them, just to keep in mind, is we're going to look at the org chart, but we're also going to have the opportunity to think about the different funding resources that we have, right? So there's our unrestricted dollars, and then there are our restricted dollars. A dollar is worth a dollar, absolutely, no question about that. But if given the choice, right, we always want a dollar that has no strings attached versus one that has strings attached. We prefer the dollar's worth a dollar. I don't question it. I'll take it either way. But if a dollar doesn't have strings attached, it means that we get to decide on any given year at any point in time what's the right use for those dollars, whether it's a counselor this year and a social worker next year, right? We have that flexibility. And so those are our most precious dollars. Then we'll have an opportunity to hear from Mr. Gardner, who's going to talk to us about some of the resulting the results we've had from Glover. Sorry, I wrote Gardner. I knew Glover. That's for the G word. Who's going to talk to us about the results we've had from SERP. I think the opportunity we've had with the results from SERP is unique here in this district, and people referenced it quite a bit. It's that idea of looking to eliminate positions as opposed to people. And so having those opportunities to look at those vacancies, to make those adjustments, to tighten the staffing, to do the restructuring, and focusing on the positions versus on people is clearly critically important to the board, is clearly critically important to staff and to the community. And so we'll get an opportunity to think a little bit about that tonight. And then we'll have an opportunity to hear about our vacancies in various, whether they're support staff or office staff. We'll get a chance to talk about some of the vacancies, and that's included in your packet as well. And then we'll have an opportunity to think a little bit about some of our other services, our major district-wide services like transportation. And so we're just that's gonna be the flow of tonight. And with that, unless there are any questions, I'm gonna hand it off to Dr. Salkett to get us started with Exhibit 8D, as in donut, is where we're gonna pick up from where we left off last week.
Program managers.
Program managers, yes, sir.
So, Exhibit 8D, similar as it is similar to how the other documents were set up. You see here the managers or the staff positions by area, noting also their work year, or their work calendar, as well as the funding type. So I think this is where you'll start to see that many of these positions have other funding sources other than general fund. So as an example, the first one, which is the induction program manager, does have a portion of, or it's actually 0.75% of that position is funded out of Title II. So very specific to the items noted with that funding. It's resource 4035. So you can see that across the board in the various departments, whether it's adult ed or equity and culture, and the particular support that those managers provide in those areas. Any questions in regards to the 7 FTE noted? Then we will move to the next exhibit.
Let me make a comment, please, Dr. Salkeld. So just to help the board, when you look at this list, like Dr. Salkeld said, each program manager lists its funding source, right? So unless it says general fund unrestricted, those are the only ones being funded out of the general fund. Otherwise, the induction program manager is Title II and the teacher residency grant. The adult ed program manager, there's 2 of them, I believe, or one, is out of the adult education block grant, which is not general fund. The special services has 2 program managers that are paid for out of the 6,500 special education master plan, which is the money we get from the state and the federal government. And then if it says supplemental concentration, 0900, those 2 positions, the director and the program manager, or the program manager there is 50% supplemental concentration, 50% Title I. And then the student services program manager is all general fund. So we're trying to help people understand, not just the board, but everyone in the district, in the community, that not all money, color of money is the same, right? And so what we're looking to, the revenues that we get that we need to cut back on are the general fund and restricted. And so sometimes we've been, sorry, Mrs. Hall, one more thing and then please feel free. What we've been doing over the past year and a half, and before that, but better over the past year and a half, is looking for ways to fund positions outside of the general fund so it doesn't impact that fund, right? And so these are some of the ways that we've been shifting funds to other resources, restricted first, so that we're not using the unrestricted general fund. Does that make sense? Okay.
So the next exhibit is
Mrs.
8.
Hall, did you have?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to point out that some of these restricted monies, you can still make choices with restricted monies on where to allocate them and how to spend them. So it's not a lock-in that they have to go to these positions or to the specific strategy. And especially with the Special Services 6500 Special Ed Master Plan, I'd like to remind the board how much contribution from the unrestricted funding goes to fund special ed, which would also include the management positions and all staff, correct? Is that correct, Dr. Sawkill?
Correct. It's inclusive
All
of all
right.
positions.
So I would say that we still have to be mindful that things can always change. We're not locked in to anything. And some funds, however, when you can't just switch out, because that would be considered supplanting, which is a big no-no. So you would have to be mindful about cutting something before you would add something back to change that funding source on something else.
Dr. Sacco, continue.
So the next document, Exhibit 8E, is a listing of the district's directors, also by department and work year. And as Dr. Jani noted, there are a couple positions in this area too that have other types of restricted funding sources that are not related to the general fund. I'm trying to find here. So as an example, if we look at the director, and this is on the third page, Director of Planning and Construction, given the scope of that role, it's actually partially funded by, multi-funded, I should say, from general fund, the bond program, as well as the CFD. And that's a management role that's multi-funded.
And as the board's looking at the director's breakdown, I just want to give a shout out to Veronica Plummer, who is our, we hired the position, the board approved a position called the Budget Control Analyst. Budget Control Analyst. And so she's been in that position since, I want to say, March or April? July. We were thinking about it March and April, and she started in July. And a lot of these reports have been a result of that position being able to pull this information from the three sources that we have, TrueCourse, Lawson, and PeopleSoft, to coordinate all of those systems and give us a report like this. And so I just want to give a shout out to Veronica Plummer and the rest of the finance team who has been working together to help compile all of this information. It's a lot. And so we thank you.
Dr. Salkett, if we could stay on that one example, just want to make sure that we all read this the same way. So in the planning, which is on the third page in, it is the head count reads 1, which means it's one person, one individual. And then it's funded out of 3 different funding sources for a grand total of FTE. You can sort of see the one head count show up a couple of different times because it gives you a total as well. But in all of those, that is one FTE.
One person and one FTE.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because from a budget standpoint, I know from an HR we look at to the staff, whereas and then from a finance perspective we look at an FTE, a full-time equivalent. So if there are no questions on that schedule, we can move on to the next item.
We'll move on to 9A unless there are questions there. I think we have some perusing still happening, so we'll take it slow.
So I have a question. So just like for reference, I don't know if we can do it from 8E, but just kind of, if we could be told when we started 5 years ago, what position was in existence, and then what's here now?
Yeah, 8E.
That could apply to, wherever we could apply that to. I guess all of them, mostly management. It's kind of where I'm looking. That'd be helpful.
So in a little later in tonight's presentation, we're going to talk about that through the org chart. And we're going to show you what we've eliminated and the funding sources.
Okay, that'll work.
It's the new reference item that was added. So what we can use that new reference as a starting point, and then we can see where questions take us, and staff can note additional requests.
And so under section 9, those exhibits, and we'll start with the teacher on special assignment because we have received questions about positions that are outside of the classroom. So this section looks at our teachers on special assignment, counselor on special assignment, and nurse on special assignment. We've had our assistant superintendent team also provided some job duty statements or some job descriptions. That's under section 5. As it relates to some of these special assignment positions. So again, similar to some of the prior documents that you'll see by area of where these staff members are providing support, where the funding resource is at, and then also the respective FTE amount, how it's allocated. So you can see some of them are through the local control funding formula, or the LCAP. Some are also Title I and Title III as examples.
Dr. Salkett, why don't you walk us through the next two sections as well, and then we can maybe pause for questions and comments on the three of them combined.
Okay, so that's the teacher on special assignment exhibit 9A, and then exhibit 9B reflects 4.4 FTEs, aside from the allocated 1/6 of the counselors on special assignment amongst the departments of curriculum, equity and culture, and professional growth. So that's noted there as well, with the respective funding sources detailed above, and then because on this particular page, you also see the summary at the bottom. And then on the last exhibit in that section is the nurse on special assignment. And that is one position, and that you can also see that has funding from outside, which is the Medi-Cal billing, where we actually submit a claim for those services, eligible services, a portion to special education, and then a portion to general unrestricted funding.
All right, so those are our teachers on special assignment, our counselors on special assignment, and our nurse on special assignment. So we pause there, give you a chance to digest that a little bit and see if there are any questions, thoughts, comments, clarifications, or additional requests that would be helpful for the board as you prepare to make some hard decisions.
So the nurse on special assignment, is she like somebody that floats around in case one of our other nurses don't come to work that day or call in sick? Is that what that's for? No.
That would be Dr. Fulcher can answer that question.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at Tom. Sorry, Tom.
And that's certainly a part of her responsibility, but for the most part, what she does is develops and chairs our wellness committee. She does some program development as well. She supports some of the testing around athletic clearances that need to take place across the district. She's a community liaison, so works quite a bit with our partners, our community partners, around health and wellness, South Bay Community Services, San Ysidro Health Center. She supports 2 schools, options as well as, I think, no options, so just 1 school. But she will cover in case there are some absences, nurse absences across the district. And there are a number of other things that she does as well. For instance, chairs the nursing meetings that take place once a month, works with our athletic trainers as well, and she also assists with our MA that you heard a little bit about earlier in our LEA billing.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Salt.
I think I'd like a similar explanation for the other special assignments. I mean, a recap of what it is, what's the purpose of their duties, where are they assigned, what are they, like what's their work schedule or work week like, so we understand that. Because also, I think one of the things when I look at all the ones that are specially funded, not just the central office type positions, but across the district, when we're with our audit subcommittee and we hear about the transferring of expense for staff from one resource to another and then back again because they didn't have the documentation required to justify using a categorical or a restricted resource for it, that's a lot of the issue I find with not having an idea of what's the purpose, so that we understand that they are filling that purpose and they're required to fill that purpose based on what their duties are as they're funded. So I think that's a check.
Would you like that now? Would you want staff to go through that now? How do you want to proceed on that?
Why don't we go through those 3 positions, and then we'll take a break.
Okay. What you mean, the teacher on special assignment, counselor on special assignment, and
We
okay.
covered no cell already, so we'll do.
Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mrs. Hall?
particularly.
To do the other 2? Oh, I misunderstood. I thought you were just talking about the counselors on special assignment and the
Nurse.
and the nurse on special assignment. Everybody. Okay. Okay. Then let's take a break now. Okay? 15 minutes. Is that enough? Gives everybody enough time. And then come back. And then we'll address Ms. Hall's questions. Okay, we're going to reconvene the workshop. Everybody, can you please take your seats?
Good for you.
Okay, we have open issue on the table. So, Luz, will you continue, please?
Yes, so I'm just going to highlight for the public and just a refresher. We have in the packet there is Exhibit 5C and Exhibit 5E, which are the duty statements for our TOSAs and our COSAs. And so for the public, just so that they know where they can find it. And the board is always, as those specific questions come up about a particular position, are welcome, of course, to send it to staff so we have that opportunity to respond more directly. Are there any other questions, thoughts, comments, points of contemplation on these three exhibits?
Go ahead, Mrs. Hall.
Well, one of the reasons why I was asking for more specific, kind of a deeper dive into particulars was because I've been feedback from our educational community, but also, visiting sites, talking to some other principals. I've understood that a lot of what happens at a school with their curriculum teams and the professional, when they have their learning teams, what do they call it, PLCs, and they're designing their own curriculum. They're doing a lot of that work together, and it makes a very cohesive team across their whole school. That's where the impact is really profound, and how the student outcomes are raised because of that. And so I'm trying to find out more about this central office curriculum resource teachers, because knowing that we haven't really, they're driving the curriculum, and from some conversations I've had, the textbook isn't really driving it's what those teams at the school are doing. So if we're having an impact on that, and that's really the impact to where they're seeing the needle move on student performance on math and English language arts, things like that, then that's what we need to consider when we're looking at where we, I believe, need to make decisions and weigh that information when we make decisions. And I see value in both, but when you're talking about what the site values and what they're seeing and what they feel, I think that we need to really listen. So that's what I want.
Okay, thank you.
That is similar information that we've heard from the school sites as well, and the principals. Do you want anything, Dr. Alvarez?
In regards to the district teachers on special assignment, so we, over the last 4.5 years, we've gone from having about 25 teachers on special assignment to having 11, and those 11 are not full-time. We have 4 that are full-time. One that is an EL TOSA, specifically funded out of Title III funds. We did initiate a new textbook adoption a 1.5 years ago, and so that person helps support that curriculum. And then with those funds, we also, at each site, have an ELD curriculum specialist that supports our English learners and our teachers at the site. We do have a full-time, and when I mean full-time, it's a 1.2 FTE for both mathematics and for English language arts, and for equity, to infuse equity throughout all of our curricular practices. In terms of the support, it really is to provide our site curriculum specialists with support to help with PLCs, to help with the SLT, which is our method of professional development, and building capacity at sites and supporting teams so that they can go to the sites and do the work. And then for the last 2 years, it's really been a focus on effective first instruction, focused on building strong instructional guides that have the standards embedded and all the resources for our students and for our teachers primarily in looking at language acquisition, what's called integrated and designated ELD, AVID strategies, and other types of supports that would help in the classroom. Inclusive, knowing that we do not have currently all of the most up-to-date textbooks, we've tried to really focus on the instructional guides to provide a guide and a platform for teachers and their resources. So that's been the focus. There are some other state mandates that occur with, as soon as we get something from the state that is instructional in direction, whether new legislation that impact what occurs in the classroom, the TOSAs also help support and deliver that to the sites. And then they many times will support new teachers, help coach, work with particular PLCs. So there's very many types of duties. We have listed them for you, but it really is to support the teachers and build capacity.
Okay, because I have a question follow-up on that. It's more to, you can clarify it later on, but I saw it in the data I had worked with, there was 7.73 FTE under curriculum for resource teachers, but I don't know because this one in Exhibit 9A, it's not subtotaled, so it's hard for me to quickly. So this, we see part of it's AVID, we have computer science, language, math, PE.
So some of our positions are partial positions. So, for example, if you look at our AVID program, our AVID is a partial funded position. Our computer science TOSA works for us for 2 periods of day, and the rest of the time is at Sweetwater High School. As I mentioned, our English language arts TOSA is a full-time TOSA. Our mathematics is a full-time TOSA. We have a PE and health TOSA that works with us for 2 periods and then is at Hilltop High School for the rest of the day. We have a science TOSA that is part-time with us and then works at Rancho Del Rey. We have a social science TOSA, and the reason that TOSA is, most of our part-time TOSAs are either a 0.4 or 0.6. The reason that total for the social science TOSA is a little bit different, it's a 0.53, is because we share that TOSA with Chula Vista High School, and they have an 8-period day, and so their FTEs are every class period is a 0.33. And so that's why it's a little bit different. And then we have a world language TOSA that supports the district and also works at Bonita Vista High School. We also have some TOSAs that are funded out of Title I through our comprehensive support initiatives and some other grants that are offered. And we also have our after-school TOSA that is funded partially by the ACES Assets program and also through Title I.
Thank you.
Move to the next section. Section 10 is looking at our site leadership positions. So it has the principals, assistant principals, and psychologists. So
That's in section 10, starting with Exhibit 10A. We have the principals.
You can see some variations with some of the funding, particularly with special ed, because it's our principal at East Hills Academy. And then on here also is some of our adult schools. So it's, that funding's related to the adult education block grant. And then there's a summary page noting a recap of those FTEs.
So we're looking at Exhibit 10A. That's where we started looking at leadership positions. We're on page 2 of Exhibit 10A. Why don't you run through the exhibits and then we can pause for questions.
And then the next exhibit 10B are assistant principals by school site and also by funding source. And you can see as some of the items, as it's noted in our LCAP, some of these positions are funded by Resource 0900. Again, this information is by school site with the summary as well. So there's a total of 69 FTEs. This is also inclusive, reflects our adult school principals, or assistant principals.
I have a question about the assistant principals. Will we get some feedback as to how well the current configuration of assistant principals is working?
Yes, the schools know that are involved in the halftime or the part, the halftime splits, that we're going to be reevaluating that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm hearing it's not working really well.
The corner group says no either, so.
Yeah.
So, just as a reminder, last year we met with the principals and talked a variety of ways. We knew we needed to cut back in assistant principals, and what the principals and assistant who used to be the principals of the schools before, because there was a time when Sweetwater cut back on assistant principals, and there was one at like 5 middle schools, and there was two at like 5 high schools, something like that. I think so. And so during that conversation, those principals who happened to be principals or assistant principals at that time, where they were the one principal and the one assistant principal, really kind of influenced the decision for this year, saying that they would rather have a half a person than only 1.5 versus 1. So the idea this year was to give that a try and see if that works, and we'll reevaluate it at the end of the year to see if it's effective or not. And so that's what we plan to do, and we're getting feedback already, but we're not going to change that approach for this year, but as we move into next year, we'll have that conversation.
And the next item is Exhibit 10C. This is for the psychologists. And then the funding here is primarily split between the LCAP and then the special education funding source, 6,500, which is covers also contribution from the general fund.
So with that, we'll pause and let you look over, and then allow you an opportunity to ask any questions or make any points.
Just as a point of clarification, when I think it was in our second year, we added a number of psychologists, and my recollection is we added 5, but around there. Okay, is that Everybody remember that? Okay.
Also, as a reminder that about 2 years into your term, we reinstated the assistant principals as well. So we reinstated assistant principals at middle schools where they only had one. And I think right when you started, I think they had reinstated the high school assistant principals where they had only had two. So a lot of those positions were reinstated, and some of those were management positions since you've been in office.
And just to be clear, some of it is because, right, we recognized the impact of increasing those school psychologists and APs, right? It's not just about in the classroom, but it's about the interaction with students outside the classroom. It's about the IEPs and assessing kids and meeting their needs in order to fully, surround them in what they need, right? And then there's the whole issue of discipline at a school, and it falls on, in many cases, the APs, is my understanding. And it's also my understanding that the APs also do classroom observations. They're the interaction between the parent and the school in many cases, especially when it's involving the discipline of students. So for high needs schools, I think that impact has been felt, reducing that AP. And I would say that the psychologists are probably, we heard the impact right away with the school psychologist. So, I mean, yeah, keeping in mind those were things we added on.
Well, and those actions were congruent with our value system. So I don't think it was any surprise to people because we espoused that value and we put our money and our actions where our mouth was. So I think it was perfectly congruent. I'm not saying it was a bad thing. I'm just saying we did that, and we did it deliberately.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts on site leadership or psychologists? Okay. And so we'll now move on to section 11, and Dr. Jani will start us at the end of 11. Okay. So Dr. Salkod would continue.
Thank you. So these next positions, a good majority of them are the ones outside of the classroom. So we've provided that information for the board to see, and as noted here on these exhibits, they range from the library media teacher to the nurse. I know there's reference to the SIS coordinator earlier in public comment. There's also the site curriculum specialist, attendance coordinator, athletic director, after school coordinator, and the counselor. And also some of these job duties or descriptions are also noted as a reference for further clarification in the package.
Question. Why are some of the library media teachers split funded? I see it at Olympian and Southwest High. They're split funded. Is there any reason for that?
Most of them through our LCAP work should be a full FTE, but we can certainly look at Olympian.
And what do they do besides, I mean, I'm hearing there was quite an impact on when the one-on-one devices were rolled out to the high schools. Significant impact and change in what they were doing in a lot of ways, because they used to do a lot of push into classrooms and doing some group work when classrooms came to the library, and a lot of it shifted to reconfiguring devices, checking in and out devices, resetting things when they went wrong in the classroom. So what's happening now? What's really happening in the library of media? I mean, we heard from a teacher at our meeting last week, I believe it was, and he, obviously at a very large school has a really quite a wide impact. But I would like to hear more about what has their duty, just job duties changed, and what has been that impact, and what does it mean?
That could be a question staff brings back, unless there's, the job description, I think, is in here.
I have a request for staff to bring back. Do nurses and library media teachers have prep periods? And that's something that you can bring back later. I'd like to know if they have prep periods. And if they don't, how is that reflected in the salary schedule for SEA?
So I have something too there, Frank. So are the library and media teachers, are they credentialed teachers? So, but currently they're strictly in the library. They're not doing any teaching. Like, they're not split up, or could it be split up where they could do teaching? I'm just asking the question. And, I don't know, like Ms. Hall, Trustee Hall was stating like what the scope of work is and how it's changed. I don't know that. But just thinking along those lines.
And are the library staffed with any classified workers, FTE? And is it consistent across all schools, or is it up to the school?
Dr. Glover?
President Tarantino, Ms. Hall, we have library media techs at all of our comprehensive sites, and a portion of them at our smaller schools. Not by name and not connected.
No, but what's comprehensive versus a smaller school?
7-12 are traditional high schools, middle schools, and junior highs versus something like Options or Palmore, one of those.
Thank you.
Okay, Luz, go ahead.
All right, so let's see. Those are our library media teachers. You've got the nurse.
Luz, can I just clarify a quick point real quick before we move away from that one? So staff did confirm the question about the multi-funded. Those are 3 schools in which we're working with the staff to update the personnel action request, the PAR, which is known. And so those are pending. They will be made 1.0 out of the LCAP funding. So it's pending from the time we issued this report.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, so we have a nurse at every school? And do we have the assistants or nurse clinicians? What would you call somebody below a nurse?
We don't have that classified position.
No?
Other districts have like a health tech.
Yeah.
But ours are fully staffed with nurses.
So we don't have those. And then is there quite a difference in their abilities as far as?
Yes, depending on the job description, but our nurses are fully credentialed school nurses and RNs.
They have to be registered nurses and have a credential to be a nurse in a school system.
Is there another question on your mind?
Yeah, because I'm just curious as to what exactly they do as compared to passing out medicine, things like that. I mean, I've never seen them do anything out of the ordinary, so I'm just curious what they do.
In some cases, there might be students with special needs, not special ed or special needs students necessarily, but a particular student may have some kind of special needs, and to administer medicines in certain ways, you would have to have some kind of specialized.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
But
Did
it's
they-
not necessarily limited to a nurse. That's
Yeah.
why some districts have other
because-
other types of positions to do that work. But I think Dr. Fulcher looks like he might.
Go ahead, Doc.
Well, I didn't hear the question, but I would invite any of you to visit a health room Those nurses are busy all day, every day. There's a constant flow of traffic in and out of those rooms. Students come in from something as mild as a headache, stomach ache, to sprained ankles and concussions. And we do have some LVNs who work on a one-to-one basis with students in our district, primarily students with disabilities. But you're right, we have a number of medical conditions in our district that nurses support. You'd be surprised at how long that health list can be, and it ranges from everything as serious as kids recovering from cancer, in some cases, to students who may be recently returning from some type of surgery. So it is a busy office, and again, I would encourage you to stop by and visit.
Thank you.
I would, if I can. Yes, I just add that I could appreciate the responsibility of the nurses at our campuses, and I would say that at a lot of our schools, that's probably some of the only medical care that our students would receive is that. And that's just it's an observation that I have.
And General Counsel Carbuccia has a response about prep periods for nurses and
Sure.
librarians.
So you'd asked the question in particular about librarians. Their Article 12.1 and 12.5 address it, so that in particular librarians work the exact same day as a teacher. They have a 15-minute break and a duty-free lunch. There is no prep period that's assigned. It does talk about whether a nurse is separate. On the nurses, it talks about if a nurse's duty-free lunch is interrupted because of the important tasks that Dr. Fulcher mentioned, that they will mutually agree to a time that they can get her or him their duty-free lunch. But it doesn't talk about a prep period.
Does it talk about a differentiation in pay because they don't have a prep period?
No, because they're still expected to work the same duty, they're the same day that a teacher's working. The difference is that they are not prepping for the classes that they're teaching. So they still have the same exact duty, on-site duty hours that teachers have pursuant to Section 12.1.
If there's nothing else on this section, I'm just going to push us a little bit because we have another section to cover. And so if there's nothing else there, if something comes to you later, I'll obviously just email those questions. And then Dr. Jani, do you want to go over the org chart, please, first?
Sure. So Ms. Facedo, can you put up the one chart, the organizational chart with the revisions on it? If the board remembers, back in August, we brought this organizational chart, at the direction of the board last year, and as a result of the opportunity that we got with SERP, we are able to eliminate a number of management positions at the district level. And this chart shows those eliminations. But back to Mr. Segura's question about what positions were added with this governance team. So when this governance team was elected in November of 2014, the district was in transition. They had an interim superintendent. And, all right. And during that time, as was mentioned earlier, there were no assistant superintendents with that title. There were positions at the district office that were paid at the level of an assistant superintendent, but they were not given. They didn't have that title. So when one of the interims was here, Mr. Phil Stover, and before this superintendent was appointed by you, by this board, you all approved an org chart that included reinstating a number of assistant superintendent positions and some other management positions. So on this chart, the 3 assistant superintendent positions were part of that org chart, not these titles, but those positions. I'm trying to think of what else was added during your tenure so far as board members. If we start on the left side of this document, the program manager for compliance, the chief compliance officer, was added during this board's tenure, but it also was eliminated last year. The director of labor relations, that position was changed from a specialist to a director. There was a labor relations specialist at the time, and it became a director position. The paralegal is a new position. General counsel is a new position. Oh, I'm sorry. So starting on the left side of this chart, of the one with the eliminations. That is the current one, but I'm starting with the ones because the question was about which ones were added and then which ones were eliminated. So, so going back to the left side, Chief Compliance Officer was already in place. Program Manager was added, but then eliminated. Director of Labor Relations was a change from a specialist to a director. Paralegal was added. General Counsel was added. Assistant Superintendent of HR was always there. We added one director of classified. I'm sorry? Oh, it was upgraded. I'm sorry. It was upgraded from a manager to a director. There was already a director of risk management. A director of grants communications and the grants manager were always already there. Assistant Superintendent of Facilities and Operations had a different title, but that position was there. The Director of Transportation, Planning and Construction, and Planning Project Managers, there were, at some point, that varied over the past 4 years. Sometimes there were 2, sometimes there were 3, sometimes there were 4. Now we're down to 2.
Depending on the work.
Correct. Planning Project Managers, The Director of Nutrition Services, the Security Coordinator and Advisor, and Director of Maintenance was upgraded from a manager to a director, but that position was there. And then we, on this org chart, we took off any non-management position that didn't report directly to the superintendent or the board. So that's why these 3 NAGE positions weren't eliminated, they're just taken off this org chart because they're not management. If we go to the Chief Financial Officer, the Director of Fiscal Services was the same. The Capital Projects Financing and Reporting Manager was added by this board. Purchasing Manager was there. Payroll Manager was there. Accounting Manager was there. Contracts Manager was already in place before you came, and that position was eliminated. And then if you go to the next one, the Director of IT and Enterprise Architecture. So back in when you started, people assumed 2 positions. So there was a Director of IT and ET and Alt Ed. They had 3 areas that they supervised, and we split those up, right? We had then a Director of IT and a Director of ET. And then we combined that later. So Office of the Clerk of the Board has always been there. Under Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Executive Director of Curriculum was there already. Director of Language Acquisition and State and Federal Programs was already there. There wasn't a principal on special assignment, but we've eliminated both those positions and changed that Director of Language Acquisition to from a Range 1 Director to a Range 2 Director this year. The Family Community Services Program Coordinator was eliminated. And a program manager picked up 2 responsibilities, the equity and culture as well as this particular responsibility. Director of Evaluation, Accountability, Research, Educational Technology, that used to be 2 different positions and we combined it to be 1, this board did. There was a program manager in there and we eliminated that position. On the other side, there was a program manager for the Director of Curriculum that we eliminated last year. We combined the Director of VAPA and CTE into 1 position, and the Performing Arts Facilities Manager was eliminated. And the STEAM Coordinator was added originally as a grant and has now been picked up as a multi-funded position, I think. I'm pretty sure. Assistant Superintendent of Leadership and Development was a new position under that org chart from Mr. Stover that has since been eliminated. The Principal and Special Assignment under Title II was also eliminated. The Director of Professional Growth was also eliminated. And the Program Manager for Induction, it remains. And it was started, that position began under this tenure because of the Educator Effectiveness Grant around the 1st or 2nd year that you began your tenure. And then in the last column, it's Assistant Superintendent of Equity, Culture, and Support Services. The Director of Special Services has always been there. Director of Alternative Education has always been there, but we've eliminated that position. Director of Special Projects was not there before, but we added that for 1 year, actually 2 years, but that position's eliminated. Director of Student Support Services has always been at the district office. The Coordinator of Student Attendance and Welfare was downgraded from a coordinator to a program manager this year. Student Support Services Manager was already there. Coordinator of Athletics was already there. Down at the bottom, Program Manager Mental Health Resource Center. That's an added position as a result of us, I believe, using the San Diego County Health and Human Services money that they used to fund those positions, and now we've taken those positions under our district, and we get their funding, but we pay for those positions under our umbrella. Program managers, special services have always been there. There were 3, now there's 2. Program manager, equity, culture, and support services has now combined and oversees now is the family community services program coordinator and the program as a program manager. Adult ed still has a program manager, and they had one before. No, that happened under the education block grant. Right. The director, we've always had a director of adult ed, and I think those are the ones we added and what we've eliminated since last year. What I also wanted to draw our attention to is the next chart. Do you have any questions about that one? Okay. What this chart shows is the current org chart, and at the request of President Tarantino, he wanted to see all of the org charts, not just the main org chart. These are all the management positions that are at the district level at this point in time. Different from the chart we just showed with the eliminated positions. These are what's left for this year. And what we're trying to draw the board's attention to in the communities is that we, like many positions in the district, they could be multi-funded. So not all management positions on this org chart are typically only funded under general fund unrestricted. So the ones that are not highlighted are all of the positions, management positions, that are strictly funded with general fund. The ones that are highlighted are multi-funded. And if you look to the second page, you will see, for example, an explanation of what those multi-funded resources are. So Director of Adult Ed is their block grant, not general fund, and as well as their program manager. Assistant Super Facilities and Operations has 3 different funding sources. 65% general fund, 5% CFDs, 5% Prop O, 25% ongoing and major maintenance, which is the restricted routine maintenance account. Chief Financial Officer, 90% general fund, 10% CFDs. Debt Finance Manager, remember that's the other position we used to call Capital Projects Financing and Reporting Manager. We changed that title to Debt Finance Manager, who oversees a lot of our debt financing around Melrose and other capital projects. Is 25% general fund, 25% CFDs, and 50% Prop O. The program manager for induction is 75% Title II and 25% residency grant that we just got this year. Director of maintenance is the RMA funding, ongoing and major maintenance, 100%. Director of nutrition services has a separate funding as well. That's Fund 13. Director of planning and construction is 30% general fund, 15% CFDs, 55% Prop O, as well as the planning project managers are multi-funded, 30% general fund, 70% Prop O. And that's because some of the projects they work on are non-CFD projects, but the majority of their work right now is under CFDs. Director of Special Services is under the 6500 account of Special Education Master Plan, 100%, and the program managers, but like Mrs. Hall said, that's a decision we make as a district, which positions get funded under the 6500 and which get funded under the contributions to special education. Program director and program manager for state and federal is 50% supplemental concentration and 50% Title I. The superintendent is 87% general fund and 13% Wallace Foundation. This year, before that used to be partially funding Dr. Carberry's position, and so since she's gone, I've assumed that responsibility with Dr. Winters. And then Director of College and Career and VAPA, 100% out of the CTE grant monies, and the Director of Transportation out of the Transportation Home to School. So just, it's kind of a little bit more information than maybe you were expecting, but we wanted to kind of give you and the schools and the community an accurate picture of the funding of the management positions at the district office.
So Dr. Jani, on the revised version, the current version,
Mhm.
I noticed some of them will have a 2
Oh,
included in there.
Right, correct. So there are 2 planning project managers. There's a 2 there. That means there are 2 positions, and there are 2 program managers for support services or special services, and that's why there's a 2 there as well. Thank you.
So for all the other positions, we can assume it's a 1.0.
Just 1.0. Thank you. At this point in time, I'd like to ask Mr. Scott Hendries to come up, our Director of Labor Relations, and Dr. Glover. They're going to kind of tag team on the next couple of charts under Section 12, which is support staff and programs. And Mr. Hendries is going to start with Exhibit 12A, the FTE. Yes.
Yes.
It should be in the packet of information you got tonight. And if you look behind section number 12, it should be there.
Table. You got it.
Thank you, Board. Dr. Jani. Wanted to kind of give a little history here of what we've been doing for the last about 16, 18 months as it relates to when this situation hit us with the budget. And I've been asked to talk about this document here. I've shared it numerous times with the associations and throughout the organization. We haven't put it out to the public. What this has done is it tracks the total number of FTEs prior. So this is as of December 2018. So that's the month that the last month before the actual SERP went into effect. And as you recall, the SERP, which was very unique for any district, we had a 2 times where you could leave the district under the SERP. That's unusual. We don't know of anybody else that's done that. It was mid-year. And this was a tracking mechanism by which we knew what we had in December of 18. And if you go across each one of those, it's broken out by bargaining unit. And you can see that the total number there is, what is it, 38? Need my glasses. 38, 55, 77. That's FTE. The reason I make that point is it's not people. There's more people than there are FTE. Okay? So if somebody works at 0.6 and somebody works at 0.4, that's just going to be 1 FTE. So there's more people than there are FTE. But if you look at that, you can see that where we were in December of 18, then where we were in January. So you can see that there was a considerable drop. That drop was because of the people that left for the SERP in December. So it dropped by just right at 200. It's almost exactly the total number of people. We had about 220 people leave, depending on their FTE. So you can see that, and we've tracked that all along for the whole year that we've been involved in this. If you look at the comparisons between December of 18, July of 19, and December of 19, you can see what's happened, because the July of 19 shows the second group of people that left. 2/3 of the folks left in the December. The other third left in January. We had 336 people leave, a little over 300 FTE that left, okay, in the total number of people. If you look, though, compared to where we're at the bottom, the 3,855 versus the 3,601, which is the current total as of December, we've had a 254 reduction in FTE. Now, why is that important? The importance of that is that to offer a SERP and to have replaced all those positions, it would cost this district money. Okay? The only way the SERP made sense was to eliminate positions. What it did is it allowed us to encourage people that were at the top of the scale to leave. Okay? They're paid higher, they have more benefits, and they voluntarily left. To get that same savings, had we not done the SERP, we probably would have had to lay off a third more people to get the same amount of savings. When you compare somebody that's 5 years into their career versus someone that's been here maybe 25 or 30 or 35 years, the difference is quite a bit. Okay, so the savings was there. Our goal from the beginning was to eliminate positions, not people. It continues to be the goal of the district. It's been the goal of this board. I've been told many times by this board that that's been what we've wanted to do. Okay, but when you look at it, we've been able to decrease the total number of positions by 254 FTE. That positions is probably closer to about 300, 275 to 300. In the interim, what we've been doing is when people have left, we've backfilled, looked at each one of those positions, but we've backfilled those positions from current staff. We have over 100 people that have promoted up into positions, and then we look at those positions, and then we look to see if we need those positions. And that's how we've strategically looked at whether or not we need the position. And we're looking at the position, not the people that are in that. And that's made some of those issues for us. But the reason that we bring this forward is that had we not, the discussions we're having here the last couple of weeks, that would have happened a year ago, and there would have probably been 450 people to get the savings that we were able to receive from the early retirement plan to get those types of savings. And that's something that I think everybody, all our labor partners, all of the staff that's worked in this should be proud of. We've been able to do that. The other thing, as I said, the tracking moving forward. There's a cost to the early retirement plan. We know that. It's over a 5-year period. That cost, again, if we brought people back, we would not be getting any savings. We'd be costing ourselves money. We certainly don't want to do that. That's not the purpose of the SERP. The SERP, the purpose, and I can't stress this enough, is that we wanted people to leave voluntarily and eliminate positions, not people. Okay. So now we're in the situation as we go forward as to how do we continue to address that with our decrease in enrollment and the needs of the sites and the staff. The other thing that's happening, and it deals with some of the things we at least have to consider. If our grounds haven't changed, even though we're shrinking in our student population, our grounds and our maintenance isn't changing. Okay, because we have fewer students. Those things, that infrastructure is still there to be taken care of. So we have to take that into consideration when we do the staffing. And we continue to look at those numbers as to where you can, with custodial staff, whether 200 students use a bathroom or 175 use that bathroom needs to be cleaned. Okay, we know that. We have to address those issues. So that's something that I think the board needs to always be in consideration moving forward with our staffing. And that's what we've been doing, looking at that moving forward. But I thought that this was something to at least provide for the board to remind us of where we were a year and a half ago or 14 months ago and where we are now. We continue to look at these numbers. And the next slide that we have, just an example. So here is a list of vacant positions that are OA1. It's one of the lowest. It is the lowest clerical. It's an entry-level clerical position. So as I said, people have applied and gotten promotions. These positions were vacated, a lot of that, because people got promotions. We've looked and said, do we want to backfill that position, especially if we're having to reduce the number of positions we've had? Okay, so these positions haven't been eliminated. We just haven't filled those. We've had those discussions with our labor partners because we'd rather eliminate a position, not put somebody in that position, and then 6 months later say, hey, we need to get rid of people. Okay, that's not what we're trying to do. That's not how we think we can solve that problem. But again, you can see this is just one example that I think there's 11 or 12 positions that are vacant, and that's the savings that would happen if we eliminated those positions. Are people happy about that? Certainly not. Are we happy about that? Certainly not. Okay, but the reality is within the budget constraints that we have and the impacts of the declining enrollment, we have to make some of those tough decisions. But again, trying to do it strategically instead of just a broad swipe to move forward on that. So I thought that was important for folks to see as an example. I think the next example that Dr. Glover is going to be speaking about is a lot of the other vacant positions that we have.
If you take a look at Exhibit 12C, that's our current list of vacancies.
Understand this schedule. This is filled positions, filled FTE.
You're
or
talking
budgeted
about
FTE? Yeah, budgeted or filled.
These are current filled positions.
No, they're budgeted positions that are vacant, the OA1s.
No, I'm
you
talking
should-
about the very first schedule that we were
Yeah,
looking.
those are currently people in positions.
This is filled.
Yes, and they're not. It's total FTEs. So, like as I said, there's more people than there are.
Right, you can have
positions.
pieces of positions. Right, thank you.
Just to clarify, so definitely filled positions, not budgeted positions? Filled, okay.
Yes, both. They're filled and budgeted.
Filled budgeted vacancies is what I
Right.
meant, yeah.
Correct. Correct.
So Exhibit 12C is our current list of vacancies. And as people have promoted or left the district, because we also have people still retire, and we also have people that change jobs and move to other organizations. Through our Position Control Committee, we review all of these. Some positions, as we've heard from both the public and those of us that have a site background, you need an attendance tech. So if we have an attendance tech leave, we're going to post that position, fill from within, and that can create a position that may be vacated and therefore not filled. And we work in collaboration with our bargaining units for that. So this is our list of current vacancies, 12C.
Some of these, like for instance, the special education one on the first page, about midway through, there's a couple of positions. So what are these instructional assistants? I'm not sure I understand what they are.
There are two classifications that would be classic. Instructional assistant is our entry level. Instructional healthcare assistant is higher level, usually involving hygiene. And these are usually IEP driven through special education. Not necessarily one for one because we have staffing levels for our classes, but an IA is the entry level. And then instructional healthcare, because of the hygiene and some other factors, they're the next level up for instructional assistants.
So on these, you're saying the healthcare assistant or the IA may or may not be IEP driven? Is that what you said?
Yes, in the sense that if we have additional aides because of IEPs, but we also have staffing levels for classrooms inside of special education.
Per our bargaining agreements? Or what?
No, not per bargaining agreement. It's through our staffing levels through special education.
So is that formula driven formula driven by what?
Let's have Dr. Fulcher respond to that question. Oops, sorry. So the question is around instructional assistants and instructional healthcare assistants. How do we determine those staffing formulas?
Some of it is IEP driven. Obviously, when teams meet, there may be a determination of additional support needed for that student. And so as a result of that, there may be some, or an IA or an IHCA could be assigned. The breakdown for most of our classes is that in our moderate severe classes, generally it starts out with one teacher and two supports, two assistants. And then if there is, again, additional support that any student in that class has, the IEP team will make that determination, and additional services could be provided, or additional support through an instructional assistant could be provided. In our mild moderate classrooms, and those would be the resource rooms of old, generally there's one teacher, could be a mild moderate teacher, and then one IA assigned to support that class. What we're seeing more and more nowadays is the IAs, the IHCAs are assigned to the school, and then the assignments are made based on need by the IEP team and the school teams.
So when there's 4 vacancies at a school, were those budgeted because they were needed, or because they were there, always been there, never been looked at again?
Generally, if you see something like that, it's because there's a need at the school. Now, a lot could happen between when that need is identified and when a list like this one is developed. Students could leave, they get transferred to another school, they could not need the services anymore based on the IEP team decision. So there's a lot of things that take place. As you know, not only in this district, but districts across the state, there's a struggle and a challenge to fill positions, both IAs and teaching positions in special ed. So that challenge remains, and I think HR and not just in this district, but throughout the state and country, I think they're all doing the best they can to fill those slots when there are vacancies.
Okay. So on this schedule here, Dr. Glover, it's got, like, under 208, it has instructional assistant special ed and instructional healthcare assistant special ed, and then it has 6,500 special ed master plan total. So are those teachers and not instructional aides, or what?
All of these positions on this schedule are classified positions.
All classified. All right, thank you.
And I'm just wondering, Dr. Salkeld, could you just kind of talk the board through, and the community, what you've been doing at the check-in meetings at the school sites? Because there's an agenda that the finance team, the special ed team, the budget analyst is there, the categorical state and federal programs is there, the assistant soup is there, or whoever supports that school, and then staff, the school secretary, the principal, anyone else who needs to be, the principal wants at that meeting. Can you just kind of run through that? Because you asked during that meeting, because I've been in those, do you have any unfilled vacancies? And where are you with those? And so sometimes it is a matter of we've posted it and we haven't been able to fill it, or because we're just not finding enough bus drivers, IAs, all those positions, and sometimes it's something else. So could you just kind of briefly, quickly kind of walk through that process so that the board knows and the community knows what you do during those meetings?
Sure. So it's actually it's our first item on the agenda, where we look at their staffing allocations. What were they allocated at the beginning of the year, and after, when we evaluated that again after day 10 to meet those contractual obligations, we look at those ratios of what's in ratio, what's required per contract. We look at the special education ratios. We look at what's outside of the classroom and any other positions. Then we compare that to a worksheet that has a list of all of their staff members, both certificated and classified. So we've worked with the schools over the last year to ensure that we have all those positions noted on there. And that's when we ask those questions. We'll start with certificated. What's vacant? What's pending? What's the communications with HR? Where are we with that? And then we do the same thing with classified, so that we get a sense of, the needs and issues or things that might come up from a staffing standpoint. But it's also our validation of what's in the budget this past year, and as we continue to build that going forward.
Thank you.
So it's a detailed view from staffing allocations down to a granular view of the actual employee and their position.
Dr. Selkett, a next step to that's a best practice for school districts to follow, is to take those
salary savings from vacancies, and at every reporting period to recognize them. So at first interim would have been, for most school districts, that first take of
Right.
salary savings. Is that a practice the district follows?
Right. So we've been putting those systems in place this past year as well, and so we looked at that during first interim. There were some things, as I had shared with the board last month too, is because some positions were charged originally to unrestricted, may have had to go to a restricted funding source. We'll reevaluate that again come second semester, because we would have, or through the second interim, to see if all those changes have been accounted for in our year-to-date numbers.
That's excellent.
Mhm.
Okay. If there are no more questions on the vacancies piece, we'll move over to transportation.
Dr. Salkeld is going to start this conversation, and then we're going to invite some of our other staff to contribute.
So what we wanted to highlight with these next items on in the section, transportation, nutrition services, maintenance, planning, and construction department, is these departments are very unique because they use primarily outside other funding sources. They either have specific restricted resources that are outside of the general fund, or they have their own standalone fund. Such as the Nutrition Services Fund. It has its own operations that are maintained separate and aside from the general operating budget. So we wanted to note that because any changes there, in some cases, do not have an impact to the general fund. So Dr. Aguirre will go through those particular examples in those departments.
Thank you, Dr. Salkeld. Just briefly touching on the transportation department, I think we had a brief discussion at the last workshop. Just wanted to highlight that while that the home to school piece is something that is not necessarily required, it's something that, as we found out, can be very high profile. We went through a process this year. We believe we have made the savings that were initially estimated when those 9 positions were strategically not replaced through the SERP process. And the special education piece, that's required, so we're mandated. You can see the numbers up on the schedule. But again, we've been fairly focused on the piece around making sure we're being efficient with the resources we have, whether it's consolidating routes, collapsing routes, and again, just like everybody else, being efficient. So one of the items we did some due diligence around is checking in with our feeder districts, and what we found is our feeder districts currently do not charge any fees. We also checked in with our neighboring districts, and what we found is they're kind of in different places. So San Diego Unified, for example, has a fee of $500 per annual bus pass. Many districts in our county actually stopped providing home-to-school transportation when that categorical funding stopped being contributed by the state. So the state no longer funded it. At some point they did. So that's an example of what we found, and I think it's an important part of the context to that particular department. Again, we try to be as efficient as we can, but at some point we basically try to be as strategic as we could with the SERP. If you look at the
Just for the, could you share with everyone what our cost of a bus pass is?
Our cost is $400 on an annual basis, and we have, in essence, a plan where a family can pay $100 on a quarterly basis. So it's broken down to 4 equal payments of $100 over the course of a year. So our fee is currently $400 for a bus pass. For students who are not eligible for free or reduced meals, for students who are eligible for free or reduced meals, there is no cost. So that's an important piece of information to know.
And Dr. Aguirre, what about students under the classification of special education?
Students who are classified as needing that support, we must transport. They're through IDEA. As long as it's identified in the IEP, again, depending on what those.
My point is, though, we do not charge them as well, do we?
Oh, that's correct. That was the question.
They ride free, and unlike San Diego Unified, if a parent misses a payment or is unable to pay, we do not take them to collections. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Unlike San Diego Unified, which takes their parents to collection agencies if they don't pay, because it was in the newspaper.
I do believe it was updated
Well, our public seems to believe that, and so does the County Office of Education. So I'm just saying that
Give
it's
clarity for our practice,
Yes.
that we don't do that.
Yes.
So,
I just agree.
I'll go on to the next department, which is Nutrition Services. In that department, again, it's part of Fund 13, so it's a restricted fund. And here, what we've been really focused on is ensuring that we do not need a contribution from the general fund. If you may recall, that's been an issue in the past. So we've been working very diligently with our department, with our labor partners, to address some of the areas where we can control. So in some areas, we've been looking at how can we address menu development by offering a more streamlined menu, i.e. less items perhaps. We can then make it so it's more efficient. And those are the types of conversations we've been having about what are some of the things that we can do in practice to help us contain costs. Because while it is a restricted fund, if you go beyond our allocation, then at that point we would need a contribution from general fund, which has been the case in previous years. So we've been very diligent about making sure that we can be as efficient as possible so we do not need or we can reduce that. And last year we did not need a contribution from general fund, but that's really the focus when it comes to nutrition services.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So are there currently unfilled positions in the Nutrition Services Department?
Yes, we have several on the other list, and they've been posted, and so we're in the process of filling some of those.
Okay, so we are actively soliciting people to replace the
Yes, we're
fill the
posting
vacancies.
and soliciting. It's an entry-level spot for most of those, so a lot of those folks are there. It's a non-promotional opportunity, so we're looking for usually subs or outside help, as outside the organization joining our organization.
And so do those individuals at that entry-level position, do they serve in the point of service for meals, or are they in some other kind of capacity?
Most of the nutrition service ones are point of service.
So that has a direct influence then on the amount of, we hear a lot of complaints about students having to wait for their food and therefore they don't eat. So that has a direct influence and impact on the amount of money that we could potentially gain. So it's an important priority, I would think.
That is correct. This is a department that not only has an expense but also generates revenue. So part of the kind of the multi-layered approach is exactly what you're talking about in terms of the service times, if you will, the wait times. That's coupled with menu development. That's coupled with a lot of other layers. But that is one of the components.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll move on to the maintenance department. This department is funded through restricted maintenance account. So as part of our requirement, we are required to set aside 3% of general fund revenues for restricted maintenance account. And as you can see, this is another department where we're trying to be as efficient as possible, filling those positions, going through the position control process. So again, it's just a matter of making sure that we're being efficient with our resources. One thing that really greatly helped us is the implementation of a maintenance management system that was not in place a couple years ago. So just to be able to track, monitor both the work orders themselves and also the expense affiliated to each work order, depending on the type of work order.
And if I could add as well to this here, this is by statute this past year, so we've had to ensure that we're at 3% of the operating expenditures, and any funds here that, even though we have these budgeted positions, if there are any remaining amounts, it has to be rolled over to the next year. So the general fund has to set this aside regardless of whether the position or those monies are exhausted. Whatever's left carries forward.
And the next department is planning and construction. In this department, our main sources of funding are, again, they're also restricted funds. Here it's the bond fund, the Mello-Roos, i.e. Community Facilities District Fund, and in some instances there's state facilities, although that's really kind of in our case it's dwindling down. But even though that is the case, as was mentioned earlier, about 5 years ago, we actually had 5 project managers. At some point, we had a district architect. So even though it's not necessarily a general fund function, we've also been trying to be as efficient as we can with the staffing that we have, make sure it's appropriate and commensurate to the level of projects that we're working on. And again, just making sure that efficiency is the kind of the word that we keep in mind. And if there's any questions.
We'll pause there in case there are questions, comments, thoughts. Good. Oh, sure.
Regarding the vacancies, especially the ones that are instructional assistants and, school site classroom assignments, how many of those are substitutes are being utilized rather than filling the position because of the needs of the site?
Substitutes are being utilized while we're in the process of filling positions. So we post, review those for qualifications, and then names are forwarded to the school sites for interview, unless, of course, there's a certain number of lateral transfers for our collective bargaining agreements, and then those are taken care of that way. So it's a combination of both substitutes while we're posting for positions.
So in the list that you provided in this section for all the vacancies, how can we tell if there's currently a substitute in that position or not, and so that the savings that might be realized will not fully be realized because there's other costs associated to keeping that service going at the school site? On that, I mean, how do you?
We have our substitutes are tracked through the frontline ASOP system, but we don't have that dovetailed into this information, but we can work for that.
So is there a way through the payroll that you track it? I mean, how do you know how many substitutes you have currently going at schools for the vacant positions?
That's both vacant positions and also when other folks are absent just as regular workers. That's through our frontline system. But as you know, Sweetwater has the luxury of multiple systems that don't interact with each other. So the ASOP frontline system doesn't speak to payroll directly. So it's
obviously,
manual.
I mean, no payroll is going to have necessarily a direct connection to a substitute system. But when you have payroll reported back and you look at it and you examine it and you see how much of it is hourly, and you go, well, who's this person that's working and receiving an hourly pay? Somebody must go and validate that they actually worked and where they worked, and occasionally, audit those functions.
So just even as of last week, we have 2 cost centers. One is cost center 113 and then 154. 113 is our day-to-day class coverage, anything like that we may have, or any staff, classified staff that might be out covering for a budgeted position that's in our contracted line item. And then we have cost center 154 for any absences that exceed 10 days. So we have dollars earmarked. Our analysts work through that to make sure that we are staying within those amounts. We were just looking at data just recently as we're looking to annualize, see how we're going to end the year compared to our budget. So we do track those substitute costs in line by line. And if there's a position it's covering, our analysts and our staff are looking at that.
So before the order is, in the vacancies that you've listed, whoever wants to grab this question, if you deem that that's really not a necessary position and you put a hold on filling it, does that happen? Do you ever say, no, we're not going to fill that position, we're going to keep that, it's not a priority? And you have that conversation with whoever's requesting that filled position?
Correct. Each one of our positions, when we have, if it's an open and position we're going to fill, we monitor the substitutes while that's going on. Mm-hmm. If we withdraw a position or we decide that, like I said, we're not going to fill it, then we're in contact with the site about the fact that that's a position they're not able to fill because they work usually through the site as far as requesting substitutes.
And so they would no longer be covered to get a substitute for that position because you put it on hold and
Correct.
the not to fill list.
And a
Correct.
good example has been maybe with Dr. Geary and with Mr. Span is we've, like with nutrition services, we've looked at positions to ensure are these budgeted or we have a substitute going into that role and tracking that accordingly within the substitute system. So we cross-check to make sure that that's accounted for.
And how do you manage to make sure that you're not continually filling positions with substitutes rather than hiring somebody that can be a permanent status in our district?
First of all, our sites would let us know for big time. But also, Mr. Winters, the other Mr. Winters, works with the school sites on classified positions. And then Dr. Aubrey works with school sites on the, well, actually, you do all substitutes, don't you? All subs. And so he's helping to track that as well. There's been guidance given out to the principals about which positions will get subs if they're absent. And which positions may not. It depends on how many are out and things like that. And so there's been guidance given out to the sites on that, and then there's follow-up by the HR department, as well as tracking when we have those meetings with the school principals. We have those conversations as well. We're tracking substitutes, we're tracking discretionary monies, we're tracking every single thing that we can track, we're tracking.
Do you ever share that information on how many subs you have in the district at any point in time with your bargaining partners?
If they asked, we could share that.
Okay.
We are low on subs. Mr. Winters, you could probably tell us which subs we're having trouble filling, what positions.
Paraprofessional subs, or IAs and IMCAs.
Bus drivers.
Yeah, we're in need of bus driver subs, LVN subs, and mostly other paraprofessionals, instructional assistants, and healthcares. They're available on EdJoin, www.edjoin.org. Just type Sweetwater into the search box, and please apply. It's an online process.
Well done.
Thank you.
All right, so that was a lot of data, a lot of information. So I want to recognize that the board is going to have some really hard decisions to make next month. So staff will be taking what they've heard from you, putting together recommendations, and ultimately that's going to come to the board for decision for action. I also want to just remind everyone, because this is a hard one, that we can do anything we want. We can't do everything we want, right? And that's how we put all of this together, is recognizing that we can absolutely do anything. We can not do everything. And one other high-level note is just fiscal solvency is not an option. Right? That's why the decisions are so hard, because we have to think about the fiscal solvency of the school district, not just now, but 20 years from now, because 20 years from now, we want to be the ones who are deciding what the programs and services are for kids. So fiscal solvency is not an option. We don't get to opt out of it. So with that, I want to just recap some of the points from last week and this week as you think about the hard decisions that you're going to have to make next week. And let's just call it what it is. Or they're going to, not next week, next month, there will be really hard decisions. What other information do you as a board need to be able to prioritize the resources that we do receive? And just, I want to sort of take this in a couple of different buckets, because I think one, high-level guidance from what we heard last week feels very consistent to what we heard this week. And so what I heard was with compliance and best practices in mind, right? It's not a free-for-all, but with compliance and best practices in mind, you're asking staff to look for opportunities to right size, and that could include restructuring. And some particular points of interest that came up were site leadership allocations, as well as the assistant superintendent level reconfigurations.
Today, we heard a little bit about those eliminated positions, and this would remain consistent with that, right, the strategy of eliminating positions, not eliminating people. A second point of guidance is looking for those opportunities to either defer something that we're doing and or reduce. And that conversation was in particular about professional services. And I'm going to just stipulate something that guidance might also be relevant for the 4,000 object code series as supplies when we get that detail. And that was an additional piece of information requested. And the third high-level piece of guidance that I heard was having staff look for those opportunities for efficiency. In particular, those opportunities that we might have to just leverage the size of the school district in terms of purchasing, in terms of hiring, whatever those opportunities are, right? We're a large school district, and we should be able to leverage some of that power from there. In terms of additional information you might need to be able to make those hard decisions, that'll be coming in the next month. There's some items from last week, and that includes, I think this was not an urgent one, but it was one that on the list of sort of the prior year comparables for what we've spent historically in the 5,000s. Some guidance, particularly to school sites, on how they make use of duplication services, seeing if there's an opportunity to sort of refine that. We heard about staffing allocations and per pupil allocations. There was a request for the updated district office org chart, and I think that one we're taking care of. I mentioned the 4,000s now by department, so that'll be a new request that staff can work on. There was also a request for prior year sort of FTE, sort of like what we've added, and I want to look to Trustee Segura to see whether that question was answered, or is there something more that you might need on that one? Perfect. So I'll take that one off the list. There's a question regarding the library media teachers, particularly what their scope of work looks like. I think the other question was answered about prep period, so we heard that one. Scope of work, and a particular question was asked about whether they can teach, and I'm not sure if the entire board heard the answer. The answer was yes to that one. Always, yes, always with compliance in mind, yeah, with compliance and best practices in mind. And let's see, and then there's the sub-cost piece that was added, sort of was that question answered sufficiently, or is there more you might need? Okay.
No, it's not really about that. I think it's sort of answered. It's something that'll be in the interim.
That gets incorporated. And it could always be a point that Dr. Salka highlights for you if it's a particular point of interest. Like oftentimes cash is a point of interest. It could be a highlight that she points out.
One of the things I wanted to also mention is the fact that one of the priorities I would hope that we didn't have in our scheme and is that we have the structure to have a better viable financial system. I think that is a priority for our board. I don't know if it's priority for all the board, but it certainly is something that we've understood over the last few years that we don't have the proper system. So I would think that we have to understand how that's being budgeted and accounted for, and what the plan is moving forward. So part of that will be coming in our board meetings, but I think for me that's a priority that I want to make sure we're on track with. So I think there's some question about what the board has control over and what the county is telling us we have to recognize and account for, whether or not it becomes a reality or not. And so like you know, it's always a picture in time. Some of that we have to say, okay, we're going to plan to the worst so that when things are better, we know we're not in a worse place, we're in a better place. Because what's happened now is we're continually rolling the ball one way or the other. Wait, back up, wait, go forward. We never get it into the goal. But so I want to make sure we keep those things in mind. And I would like to understand, because I haven't seen yet what everybody's been emailing us about, and seem frantically that they've gotten allocations that are really changing the scope of things. So the board hasn't received any information on that. So I think, you know, I would look forward to that coming to us in a board meeting, that we are explained what's happening and at what points you're planning to do certain things. And I think we did say plan to the worst case scenario. So what is that? And what are the not so worst case scenarios? So we can determine what are you going to layer back in at what point if we have the funds. And we recognize, and the county finally recognizes that we're not in the place that they think we are. We're actually in a much better place. So I want to understand that. Keeping in mind that we have other funds, like the adult ed fund, you know, in the governor's budget, there is no COLA. So what does that mean? I mean, I think that adult ed has been doing tremendous work to keep their schools really viable, to meet the students' needs, to think outside the box. But I want to make sure that they keep doing that. And so I think we need to hear about that as well.
I want to just take a quick temperature on something. So you said something significant about the financial information system being a high priority. So I'd like to get a sense from the rest of the board before staff starts working on that to see what the rest of the board.
We actually have a board item coming to the agenda on Monday for next steps on that.
I would also like to respectfully ask Dr. Scavarna to advocate for us with the county in this endeavor. And perhaps he is asked to be on our agenda from now on, and perhaps he can address this issue in his report to us on the 27th.
So we went over guidance. Stakeholders. So a couple of places where I heard some comments and some wonderings about input. So one, there was a question about the LCFF advisory group, which is in process. We want to make sure that we're gathering input from our labor partners, and then today from sites specifically. And so making sure that we're including them in terms of that stakeholder engagement and hearing from them as we proceed and present to the board a list of possible spending reductions.
How do we, if we have some ideas that we'd like to be considered, how do we get those to staff? Do we do that through Dr. Jani? And is that fair enough?
Yes, I would say Dr. Jani is probably the best resource for that. And email is probably the preferred option, Dr. Jani? Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And just take a moment. Is there anything else? Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure did you mention early on in what you had noted there that there was I know I had brought it up about a reduction of consultant services?
Yes. So
You did mention that?
In the professional services and supplies we added today, but looking for opportunities to either defer an expense and or reduce those expenses.
I would also like to recommend for consideration, last time Mr. Segura mentioned that cuts should happen at the top. I would like to put forward a recommendation that staff come up with some kind of formula to further reduce our stipend in direct proportion with the amount of cuts that we will be making over the next year or 2 years.
I got a real simple one. Don't buy the board dinner anymore.
I don't know that our dinner costs that much, but we're not ordering from Fleming's or anything. But
Lippy's getting expensive though, Frank. I don't know.
You know, it is an expense, but I don't think I think that it's not the impact on our stipend would probably not be significant in terms of solving the budget crisis, but I do think it goes a long way for optics, and also that we're part of the solution as well.
I would agree.
Right, so we've got board stipends, we can look at the dinner cost. I know one thing some school districts do that I think is a fantastic idea is they actually have nutrition services cater it, so that it's less costly, and the board gets to experience what students experience at school.
How much can a Felipe's pizza cost? $20 at the most. I don't know.
Okay.
Yes, they can go
Well,
ahead
if you're looking for a gesture, it's a gesture that I suggest, because it takes staff time to run out, to order it, to put it out there. And also, I'll try to not order them to print me every board item from here on.
That'll save trees, absolutely. Okay, so with, again, hard decisions that we have to make in a month, is there any other information that you're feeling right now that you might need that would be useful, helpful, or any other guidance you want to provide to staff? Because they have the high impact that they're going to be looking at. We always work off of our LCAP goals. We're always following our mission. Is there anything else that comes to mind as they're going to start doing that hard work, right? Their hard work comes first, and that's the hard work of coming up with a list of possibilities for you to contemplate. Yep.
I think they have to look at the schools through the lens of which ones need the most help for the students.
Okay, so ensuring that equity lens is there.
Because there's some schools that really aren't. They're just now starting to make a little progress, and they're in high-need communities. I think they need to be looked at differently.
And so that's my way of phrasing that is to think hard about student needs, not numbers. Okay. Timeline is included in case there's anything that comes to mind, anything else we want to see. This is the timeline that we'll be following. And again, I know you know this, but for the public, it's always important. The reason that action is looked for in February is because two things have to happen in March. So one, we've got the March 15th, which we have to recognize that's the law that we live under. And then two, the list of approved spending reductions, then make their way into the multi-year projections for second interim. And so that's a critical piece of that fiscal recovery plan that the county is seeking, right? They're seeking those board-approved spending reductions that then staff gets to implement. Okay. So with that, just a quick, this is where we were trying to get to at the end of our 8 hours. And so I just want to have a check-in. Did you have an opportunity to voice your ideas? You did? You had some good ones. Did you have an opportunity to ask your questions? And did you guide the actual prioritization of our student needs based on our LCAP goals? And remember that high impact, right? You did the high and the medium and the low. It's the high that's going to guide the work that your team is doing, right? We have limited resources. We have to make hard decisions, and it's going to be that high list, which is the same list you had from last year, right? It didn't change, and so it's going to be that high list that staff is going to use as that guiding force to be able to come to you with a list of recommendations. And I think that point is worth highlighting. So the board has not made any decisions yet. The board will have the opportunity to hear staff's recommendations, I believe at the first board meeting in February. Is that correct, Dr. Jani? So at the first board meeting in February, the board will have an opportunity to hear and discuss staff's list of recommended reductions and reallocations, and then at the second board meeting in February is when the board will be asked to take action on that list so that we can do all the moves that we have to do in the month of March.
Before we adjourn, I'd like to thank you, Luz, for your facilitation skills and for guiding us through this process. You warned us that it would be difficult, and I think at times it was, but I think it was valuable, and I think that hopefully staff has the direction in terms of where we want to go with our next steps. And again, thank you, and we'll keep you posted as to how things go. I make that pledge to you. And with that, this workshop is adjourned.